right.
Well, yeah, let me DM RJ because I don't know where he is and he should be here.
How do I turn on my camera?
Test, test, test. All right, cool.
Awesome. 1 second.
I already pissed off Brianna today, so
What did you do?
I said Monica Lewinsky was the one with the real power.
I missed this discussion, but it's
All right.
okay. Well, I don't know where RJ is. When he gets here, we'll add him in.
Unprofessional.
Wait, technically it's a minute till. So
True, true. He's still
The
got some
assignment
time.
was 5 minutes ahead of time.
Are you using a different mic, Brianna?
No.
It sounds. Why do I have you turned up so loud? Let me.
I can turn
hold
myself
on a
down
second.
if that's helpful.
One moment, please. I got you. Okay, excellent. Okay, yeah, I'll just start. You guys have all been on my show before. I'll do my shtick. Welcome everyone. Introduce the topic, and we'll get into it. Hopefully, he gets here soon. If not, oh well. Lactoid, you'll have to carry your team to victory here. So, okay. Okay, welcome one and all to yet another episode of WIC TV. It's a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. And today's kind of a serious topic. So first of all, thank you all for being here. TPXer, Falsers, Tegma, Grackle, always a pleasure. Nice to see you. And as you get into my YouTube stream, gang, welcome as you come into there as well. We are still waiting on one guest, but hopefully they get here soon. I haven't heard from them. But we're going to be talking today about the legal troubles of Donald J. Trump. Go on.
Sorry, you say his name and I just laughed involuntarily. I
Oh,
apologize. Unprofessional.
it's fine. We're going to talk about whether or not the legal pursual of, I guess, the pursual of legal action against him is a witch hunt. We're going to be talking about what it means for the country if he is arrested. What are some of the potential pitfalls of this? What effect is this going to have coming forward? Should he even be arrested as a political figure? Does it count as interfering with the election for 2024 if he's put under legal pressure like this? We're going to talk about all of that today. I wish RJ was here. RJ is probably the Trumpiest Trumper you'll ever Trump, but he's not. So we're going to make do with what we can. But hi, how's everyone doing today? How are you all?
I'm feeling it. What about you, Wick?
Oh, so far so good, but we just started. We'll see how it goes. How about you, Lactoid? You doing good?
doing great. No, it's a great Wednesday. For
Yeah.
however good a Wednesday can be.
Fair enough.
Before we start, I just want the audience to know I may not have an American flag behind me, but I love America just as much as Lactoid. So
You want to borrow one of mine, Brianna?
I do.
Anytime
Okay.
you need an American flag to make an appearance on the panel, you can just raise your hand, and
Okay.
I will hold up
Thank
as
you very
many
much.
American flags as
Really
you feel is
two,
necessary.
so I can beat Lactoid would be ideal.
About 3. You're
Yeah.
destroying the toy.
That's right.
now.
That's right.
Those are very small American flags. They don't compare to
They're
mine.
big in our heart. That's where it matters.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And yeah, I mean, patriotism is a thing, and we could talk about how this plays into that. We can also talk about if he was still a sitting president, right? If he was actually in office, would that affect everyone's opinions here? But I wanted to give each of you a brief opening statement before we get into it, and just give your general thoughts on the question: is should Donald J. Trump face prosecution, indictment, and arrest for what he is being accused of? And we're going to start with Brianna, go ahead.
So blanket like disclaimer statement here. We don't know the specific charges. We don't know the evidence. So I just want to say all of this is on my guess of what the charges are going to be. And of course, I'm a reasonable person. I'm going to withhold ultimate judgment. And this does go to trial and it's put in front of me. But I think generally speaking, there are a few things I can say. America is not the only country in the history of the world to deal with corruption with public officials. And for whatever reason, we have chosen to look the other way with both parties, but mostly with Republicans, increasingly through my lifetime. And, after the Iraq War, there was really a sense that we didn't need to have any charges for any of the people that brought us into war, that like shame would cause the Republican Party's fever to break and they would come back to reality. Well, what we've seen every single year since that is it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Donald Trump was that fever metastasizing. A president that wholly believes he is above the law and has a long, deep history of blatant illegality in the way that he has conducted himself. So I want the rule of law. When when Lindsey Graham chose not to impeach Donald Trump in the Senate, he said that outside of the Senate, in the justice system, that was where the answer needed to come for Trump. Fair enough. Let's give it to him. I want the rule of law. And to be clear, I want for all corrupt politicians, not just Republicans.
Okay, thank you. We'll get into it in the open, I am sure. Blacktoid, go ahead. What are your thoughts here?
Sure. So I agree. We don't know all the specifics. We don't know the specific charges. We only have some ideas. But I believe, based on what I've read and based on some of the absurdity of the leaps that are being made here, I think this is motivated somewhat by Trump derangement syndrome. I think you've heard a little bit already of this is a fever metastasizing. This is threat that must be taken care of. And I think there's a reason why the Congress is looking into this as being politically motivated. They had apparently it's information since 2018, but of course sat on it until before election campaigning season started. I think that's already suspicious. And I'm going to be talking a lot about the merits of the claims, the accusations against Trump specifically here. I'm not a Trumper. I wouldn't describe myself as a Trumper. And I am not a New York lawyer, but I am a lawyer. And I was looking through a lot of the legal documents on this, and I'm a little bit, or more than a little bit, confused as to how they think Trump committed any crimes. At least any crimes in which New York could go after him for what they're saying he did. It's pretty ridiculous. So.
Well, again, we'll get into it in the open, I am sure. We'll see how it goes. And gang, if you're listening, because I don't know if RJ's coming. I hope he gets here, but we're gonna give him another 10 minutes, and if he doesn't show, so before I let Portland go here, if you are a big Trump stan and you want to just jump in, we kind of need one here. So just jump in the Discord and I'll see. I'll do a little DM back and forth. Make sure you're okay, and then we'll get you in. I'm really kind of upset. That
Time for
Yeah, he didn't
Grackle to
mean-
make his on-screen debut. Oh, and his
That's-
Biden's a fraud. Is
yeah,
that
I
RJ?
think that's probably Dingo, but I'll check. Anyway,
almost
go.
Definitely Dingo.
Yes. Anyway, go ahead, Portland. Let's hear what you got to say.
Cool. Thanks for having me. Portland is Burning on Twitch and Twitter, mostly just hang out on WIC panels and talk about things that I find interesting. Eventually, I'll make some kind of content out of it too. But I think that it's telling that the only diehard Trump supporter on the panel chose not to show up to make his case. I think that you'd have to be rather delusional to look at the body of evidence that we have over the years of Trump's wrongdoing and assume that there is absolutely no validity to the current allegations that he misappropriated campaign funds to pay hush money to a porn star with whom he was having an affair. I think that is pretty clear if you're being objective. I think that it's arguable that it's being maybe over exaggerated in its seriousness for political reasons, and I think that's really the only criticism that's worth entertaining here. I'm eager to hear Lactoid's argument as to whether he feels like the laws that have been broken, assuming everything that we know or that we assume right now is true, whether Lactoid feels like there's just not a severe enough crime being committed here to, charge the president of the United States, former or current, or whether it's just an issue of like the crime itself not being serious, or whether we think that there's like fabrication or manufacturing of charges, or like I said, exaggeration of the facts for like political motivations. Looking forward to the argument. So thanks for having me.
Okay, so yeah, apparently it isn't Dingo, the person DM'd me. It's not Dingo. It's someone else that we know. But again, I want to give RJ 5 more minutes just in case his house caught on fire or he's stuck in traffic. I don't know.
Fair enough.
Um,
Wick, I want to respond to an ad hominem
Please, go
attack
ahead.
right now, very quickly. Lactoid, I want to be really clear with you. I love this country. I'm going to assume you love this country too. I don't have Trump derangement syndrome. I am someone who has studied the news very carefully. I'm not emotional. I'm not angry. I have watched his presidency and watched his behavior. I have valid, real, serious misgivings over the way he has conducted himself. And this is the reason that he has found himself fighting off lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit and impeachment after impeachment. So, just moving forward on this panel today, I have a proposal to you. I'm going to talk to you with respect. I'm going to assume you love this country. I'm going to assume you're bringing your own analysis to this to look at this through. And I'm going to ask you to pay me the same respect back, please.
I have no problem treating you with respect, but I think it would be absurd to say that you're not emotional about this when you describe somebody as a fever metastasizing.
I think the
That is
Republican Party
deliberately, hold on, that is
has, I said
deliberately,
the Republican
hold on.
Party.
Regardless, right? When you're saying this is a fever metastasizing, that's emotionally charged language. You are obviously putting forward some kind of, and you can do that. I'm not saying you're wrong for having emotions, but like you're going to portray your emotions, and I'm going to criticize them. That's perfectly fine to do on a panel.
I think that's a fairly sexist argument. I'm not being emotional here. And the Republican Party has taken a further and further break from reality the longer I have been alive. It happened with imaginary weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It happened with birtherism. And this is a continuing trend. Additionally, every single time there have been these claims in the media that the fever was about to break with the Republican Party. We thought that in the aftermath of the Iraq War, where we went to war over imaginary weapons of mass destruction. We did that after birtherism and Obama, and Republicans seem to have thought that after the January 6th insurrection. That specifically is what I'm talking about. The audience can make up their own mind if I'm being emotional about those facts or not.
Great. Let's leave it for the audience to make up their mind about whether or not calling somebody or calling a party a fever metastasizing is emotionally charged language or not.
I
think it's probably pretty obvious, but sure.
just really quick. I want to get to the substance of these things, right? I think that there is a question that Portland had that I'd like Lactoid to answer of, do you think that it is simply the charge itself is too weak, therefore you don't think he should be indicted and arrested on this particular charge? Or do you think he just shouldn't be indicted and arrested because it's too dangerous or for whatever reason, right?
I can think of a
be
couple
more clear?
reasons to just like build that question out a little bit. I can think of a couple reasons why you could make the argument that it would be disadvantageous either domestically or abroad for our international standing and our divisive current political culture in the United States to prosecute the former president and presumed like front runner for the Republican nomination in 2024. I understand that there's political capital to be expended on both sides. I just think that it's a principled position that's worth taking.
Sure. So I'm not opposed to indicting people, former presidents, for committing crimes, right? If they committed crimes, it's perfectly fine. I have an issue with these particular charges. A couple things. Hush money. Hush money is not illegal. Confidentiality agreements are perfectly legal. I have drafted them. I have used them. They are well within legal purview. You can send them to people and say, hey, I'll give you this much money if you don't talk about something. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing illegal about
Nothing's
that.
being accused. There's nothing about the accusation that says that that's wrong in principle, just that he misappropriated campaign funds to do so.
Correct.
Well, we're starting there. I just want to start out with that. The second thing, misappropriated campaign funds. This is sort of the issue of you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can use campaign funds to acquire confidentiality agreements that they benefit your campaign. There's nothing wrong with that. The allegation is that not the Trump campaign, but that Cohen was paid by the Trump organization from non-campaign funds. And the argument being made is, well, paying off Stormy Daniels was actually a electoral action. This was actually some kind of furtherance of his campaign, and it wasn't being paid for through campaign funds, and that's the problem. Now, the problem is, prior to 2018, Cohen had repeatedly stated that, and this is, I think, very obvious, that this was not had nothing necessarily to do with his campaign, but it was about maintaining Trump's personal character, especially because he's married. Now, arguably, I suppose any single time you spend money to make yourself look better and you are also running for some office, technically that could be twisted to be some kind of electoral expense. But I think that's just blatantly ridiculous, right? That's just blatantly ridiculous. What happened here is, I mean, if we're just being frank, he cheated on his wife, and Cohen tried to help him out by trying to get the person he cheated with to sign an NDA. And I mean, not only did she renege on that NDA, but there's no, first of all, Trump has denied even knowing about this, but even if he knew about it, that wouldn't actually change the fact that it's not illegal. The only way they could prove that he did something wrong is if they can find like some direct, and if this exists, then I'll eat my words, some kind of direct communication from Trump to Cohen saying, hey, in the interest of pursuing my campaign, please pay Stormy Daniels this amount of money so I can win, right? That would be
Yeah.
suspect, right? But
Now,
unless they
do
have
you
something
thi-
like that, they're fucked.
Actually,
So
can
you,
I
your
jump in here?
understanding,
So
really
Just
quick.
wait, stop.
Yeah,
Both
quick
of you,
question.
both of you stop. Both of you stop. We'll go Brianna, and then you can respond, Portland. Go ahead.
No, I just want to say super quickly, Lectoid, I am perfectly prepared to just agree with everything you're saying here. Yeah, I'm not a lawyer. I have to go with what the media is reporting from lawyers. And I think the direction, the analysis that I've read seems to indicate that this is certainly the weakest of all of the cases that have come forward. So I'm perfectly like, I just want to really be clear. I'm not hanging the fate of the United States on this particular charge. I do want to ask a clarifying question though. Have you worked much with filing FEC documents in your
No.
career?
No.
Okay. I've done this a lot, man. I've done this a lot. I do it every day. I've got a 2-hour meeting with my lawyer tomorrow about FEC documents. And I have to tell you, we take compliance with FEC law in how you can spend money extremely seriously. Mistakes happen, but I'm not a lawyer, but I can tell you from my estimation as someone that does work in this field and spends more time on compliance probably than any other issue except for fundraising, this is such a blatant misuse of campaign resources. For me, it's so obviously not something you should do. There's no lawyer in the entire world that will give you an all clear on this. And it's obviously not the strongest case, but I can tell you the culture of organizations genuinely trying to comply with FEC stuff, this is just, it feels egregious from my perspective. Does that make sense to you?
I hear you, and I mean, I think it's also important to note that the FEC isn't really involved in this. It's a New York indictment from
Sure.
a DA. But the one thing I would correct is, again, this wasn't paid out of election funds. This was
Sure.
paid out from the Trump organization. Had nothing to do with the election.
But it
And
runs
in fact,
afoul of campaign finance law.
well, the argument is it might if paying Stormy Daniels was a campaign action. That's the
Sure.
question. And this is where the stretch is, because again, like, is paying somebody to not say something damaging to your personal reputation, potentially damaging to your marriage, could that also serve a valid campaign purpose? Likely. in the same way showering does, right? If you show up in the campaign stage unshowered, it's going to look bad. People might not like, oh, that person's unkempt, but it would be ridiculous to have to report, your shower bills as like campaign expenditures because, hey, that was used for an electoral purpose.
You can actually do that, but that's a whole nother discussion.
You don't have to.
Yeah, you do.
You have to report your water bills to the amount that you use
Not
for
water
showering
bills,
to the
but if you're
FEC.
going out of your way to something like a hotel, or do you remember the story about John Edwards' haircuts and how expensive those were?
Yeah.
Certainly those kinds of things do end up in FEC reports. Childcare shows up in FEC reports. There are all kinds of things. I once had Gamergators go after me for eating a lot at one particular restaurant because it showed up in my FEC report. So yeah, you do actually have to report things like that.
If it's used, yeah. I mean, that's surprising to me if it's like a particular restaurant that you happen to be at. Unless there
Why
was
the receipts are in the report.
yes,
Yeah.
unless there was something, it was related somehow to some kind of campaign activity. The question
Mhm.
here is whether or not this was more related to his marriage, which was what Cohen was saying before 2018, and the position of his former attorney as well. I forget his
You
exact
really
name,
in
Robert
all
Costello.
honestly though, like, are we taking the position that in August, the national of 2016, the National Enquirer solicited Stormy Daniels for an expose on her affair with Donald Trump to get him in trouble with his wife, and that Michael Cohen and Donald Trump conspired to kill that story to make sure that he didn't have like an awkward dinner with his wife, not because he was in the midst of a presidential campaign and was the Republican nominee? Like, are we really taking that position in good faith, or are we just
Well,
kind of
so
doing
that's
whatever we can to muddy the waters there?
Well, no, this is the question, right? So that could very well be their intention, but prior to 2018, that's what Cohen was saying, and to date, that's what his former attorney Robert Costello said that he said. That was the idea. Now, is it also, again, personal reputation does have a campaign effect? I can't deny that. Of course, it does. But then, if you want to like draw those lines, it gets ridiculous. And not only, it doesn't have to be ridiculous, by the way, or I guess it would have to be ridiculously ridiculous, because John Edwards, somebody brought up John Edwards. He was investigated and actually had a trial. My understanding, over $1 million in payments because he got his mistress pregnant, and he wasn't convicted. He wasn't convicted. And so, and that was way more clear cut than this. So the likelihood that he's going to be convicted is just astronomical.
2 questions for you. Well, 1 question for you, and then I want to let Biden's a fraud in here.
Oh boy.
Nice to
Again,
nice
this
to
is
have a
a small
diehard.
risk since RJ no-showed on me, but we kind of need a more Trumpian perspective here to kind of balance these out. But Biden, I'll just call you fraud. Fraud. If you're not respectful, if you're not matching the energies, we're gonna take it away. But before I let you in to Lactoid, do you think that the Edwards in that case should have been convicted based on the evidence that you've seen of it? Like whether or not he was or not, right? Do you think that they just went easy on him because he was a nominee, or do you think that they should have prosecuted?
I think they went easy on him because the laws are the laws here are actually way more gray than people like to admit. The Edwards case was much more clear because he was making the payments by check and directly lying on the memos. He was I think one of the checks was for like bookcase, right? He was labeling them as campaign funds under the wrong items, and then in order to mask the fact that they were mistress payments. But honestly, if he had just made the payments to the mistress from the campaign fund and labeled it paying off the mistress so I don't lose the election, that would be fine. That'd be totally fine with me.
Okay. Fraud, go ahead. What are your thoughts here? Do you think Trump should be arrested?
It's pretty stupid because this happened how many years ago? And they're just not bringing it up because of why? Because he's supposedly going to run in 2024, which honestly, I hope he does win. But that's a whole different other topic. I mean, it's pretty stupid because I get why they're doing it, but it's also really the laws and how they're coming about it is really just very weird and
So say he did break a law. Okay, let me help you out, Fraud. So say he did break a law, right? He is guilty of election fraud, and election payment fraud. Do you think
Mhm.
that he should, even if he's running for president, right? Even if he is on the campaign trail and a contender for 2024, why do you think he shouldn't be arrested for that?
as I'm gonna say, innocent until proven guilty. All the evidence still has not come out yet, so I do not. I know some of the evidence. I do not know all of the evidence, and because of what's happening, we do not know what all of the evidence or what the charges are, frankly. So until we know exactly what the charges are, what the evidence till the trial happens.
I want to ask
he-
both of you a question. I
Okay,
appreciate
okay.
the fact that you're kind of taking this on super, super short notice. And like, I'm not asking everybody to have all the answers. None of us have all the evidence because that's not how the legal system works. But the question that I have for the two of you is, if evidence is sufficient to prove that Donald Trump has committed a crime in the way that this payment was arranged, are you okay with the justice system pursuing an indictment on those grounds, assuming there is adequate evidence to do so, like there would be with any other criminal case?
Yes, if there's
course.
adequate evidence, then yes, I do support them indicting him.
Well, then all of us agree here. I mean, this
Yeah,
is great. All of us
we're
love
all on
this
the same page.
country, and all of us want
Is
to
it
have this
great?
rule of law.
Well,
Lactoid, just to back up, like I agree with you. These charges strike me as fairly weak on their face, though. As a political professional, it kind of offends me to see someone going so weak with the rules. But I was really, really worried that we would have Republicans coming on here today and saying we should not have the rule of law. This really makes
We were
me
going to have one. We
feel
failed.
much better about the state of the country because no Democrat I ever saw came to John Edwards' defense. So maybe things are better than I had surmised.
I think
With
the
respect
important.
to the comment about the timeline, Biden's a fraud, I think that it's reasonable to have questions about the timeline, especially if you're not like a legal professional, which I'm not either. But I know that
Neither am I.
just in the case of like, regular criminal court cases, you can sometimes take, a very, very long time to see charges actually filed after the process of like, collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses. And in this case, like getting information from the informant, Michael Cohen, starting in presumably 2018 when he was charged with his own crimes. So, like, this is a process that takes a while. The wheels of justice turn slowly. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, if you have a shitload of money, you can usually do a lot of things to stall that process to a pretty significant degree.
Well, a
Well,
couple.
I guess
Yeah. No, I have a question for Lactoid. Why are they pushing the arrest on and on? Because they said they were going to do it yesterday. Then they said they were going to
Trump
do it
said they were
today.
gonna do it
Because
Then they were going to say they're going to do it next week.
Yeah.
I guarantee you they'll do it when the elections process starts because that's how it works.
Well, so here's what's going on. So and again, this is what I think. I don't know this. This is
Yes.
just what I think, but looking at the timeline here and looking at the facts, my understanding is that Cohen was convicted in 2018, which means that there was a time beforehand in which evidence was coming out and they were collecting evidence on Cohen. I understand the wheels of justice move slowly, but 5 years,
Yes.
5 years slowly. I think the timing is particularly relevant when you look at they would charge the grand jury, who, by the way, almost never refused to
Wait.
recommend charging somebody, and then real quick, and then that gets into place, and then we are on the cusp of campaign season, right? So throughout the whole campaign season, what are his political opponents going to be able to say? Well, he's currently under, he's been charged and is awaiting trial for this awful crime. That's something that I think is
Another
Oh, wait,
shot.
I need to call you on this. Hold on. I need you
Did
to
I misstate something?
First of all,
what you
first of all, Portland, before you do that, are you finished, Lactoid? I want him to
I'm
get
not,
it out loud.
I'm not quite finished. If I said something incorrect, please correct me.
No.
Now,
Okay, fine. Go ahead.
okay, so now we're going to have that whole process happening during the campaign season. Now, why do they keep dragging it on and on? Well, according to Politico, right? This is Politico's own analysis. They agree with me that grand juries almost never refuse, especially in New York, or especially in New York against a Republican candidate. But if it indicated that they might not do it, the prosecution would suspend the proceedings. And what happened just recently? They announced they were suspending the proceedings. I don't think this is going anywhere, and I think the reason why they haven't taken it somewhere is because they have no ground to take it anywhere. That's my analysis, just based on what I'm seeing and the actions I'm seeing. I don't know for sure, but
Go ahead,
right,
Portland.
correct me.
Okay.
Portland.
Toyd, I need to point out that you're skeptical of the timing in this case, in like when they're choosing to try to attempt to bring charges, but you see no reason to be skeptical of the timing of Stormy Daniels' affair with Donald Trump coming almost 10 years before she was in negotiation with the National Enquirer during 2016 election season, after Donald Trump had already won the nomination. That timing should be ignored, because it's actually a very plausible explanation that he was just trying to bury that story to stay in good graces with his wife, not to obfuscate the nature of his behavior in favor of his in service of his campaign. I just think that your skepticism of one and your willingness to accept the other kind of bear a bias that I think makes it really hard to take that position seriously.
No, so what I'm pointing out is that they have to find that Trump intentionally did this beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Just a hunch or like that probably happened is not enough here. That's what I'm pointing out, right? He has a ironclad defense here. Well, no, it wasn't for the campaign. It was because I didn't want my wife and the world to know that I cheated with a filmed prostitute. Essentially, is what happened. Now, so if you ask me, like, what do I think is more likely than not? I'm gonna have a different opinion there, but that's not the standard that we're looking at. Now, as to the point of the National Enquirer, my understanding is that, of course, the payment's going to happen around the time that the National Enquirer is likely to leak that story, or likely to publish that, or likely to put that out. And so, are you telling me the National Enquirer got the rights to that story in 2006, or did they get the rights
No, the
in
National
2016?
Enquirer was attempting to purchase the rights in August of 2016, which is what began the series of events leading to the hush money payment, and which is the reason that it's associated with the election season and the fact that he was already the Republican nominee for the presidential election of that very same year, rather than it coming out at any point prior to that, even though she could have solicited the National Enquirer for rights to the story at any time. But the only time that it was valuable to a significant degree was in the run-up to the election, and the reason it was valuable is because it would directly influence people's perception of the candidate.
Wait, Portland, yes, I accept all of that, and this is like the relevant point here. I don't deny that Stormy Daniels probably did this, and the National Enquirer probably did this, because this would be the time that it'd be most valuable, and that also makes sense. That lines up with why the NDA would be around that time as well. That doesn't necessarily mean it was for campaign purposes. It just means that it was being pushed by people who had it had campaign purposes in mind. A, B, there could be like a valid campaign purpose why it's being pushed, but a non-campaign purpose why it's the NDA is being put out there. Hey, I know you're pushing this now because the campaign is on, but even if this happened 5 years earlier, we'd probably still give you this amount of money in order to not fucking talk about it, because we don't want you to talk about this. 2 and 3, here's the final point. Even if they can show that the Trump campaign was involved in this, in order to find Trump guilty of the Class E felony, they have to find that Trump personally did this. Right?
I know.
That's the next step. That's already far away.
You already laid out that requirement. I'm on board with that requirement. I understand it. I'm pointing to the fact that you're saying there's possible, perfectly reasonable explanations for A, but no plausible explanation for B. B being the timing of the indictment versus the timing of the payout. And I think that those are just extremely similar situations, and you're choosing to view them through very different lenses.
We've already gone through this.
I'm not viewing them differently.
Yeah, I have a question, Wick.
Go ahead.
So, Lactoid, and first, I genuinely mean this. I don't want you to feel like this whole panel is just ganging up on you. Like you came here to defend this today, and I genuinely respect it. And I respect your legal experience. I think it's bringing a lot to this conversation. I do want to push back though, because you said the timing, in your view, looks suspicious. Are you familiar with the OLC, the Office of Legal Counsel memo, rather, about the possibility of basically indicting a sitting president? Are you familiar with this?
I'm not familiar with the particular memo, but I'm guessing this is
Sure.
we can't do it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
basically it. It's
for
really
sure.
interesting because this actually happened during the Clinton era, because a bunch of people were going after Bill Clinton. The argument there was it basically puts an undue burden on a sitting president to have to fend off these kinds of legal charges while they're president because it undermines executive authority. I have to say, having seen it applied to both parties, I can at least understand the logic there, right? So I'm willing to stand by that, right? So, but because of that, I have to tell you, like seeing these charges brought forward when it's really not that long after Trump left office, to my view, this seems like an utterly reasonable timeline. Like he could be charged. The wheels of justice started spinning. I'm sure you know there was an election in New York. The prosecutor looking at this changed a few times, and they eventually arrived at this conclusion. To my view, this timing doesn't look suspicious. It strikes me as very, very credible.
Sure. I understand that position. I don't agree with it. I think 2 years is still a long time for a grand jury, especially. And when you look at what the grand jury is presenting, of course, a lot of that's been hidden. There's some indication that not all the evidence is being presented, at least according to Robert Costello. But I think 2 years is indicative of something. And I think the fact that we're on the cusp of campaign season, I think, is indicative of something. And that's just the time. Again, I don't know for sure. I even said
Yeah.
that. It's just the timing to me seems a little bit suspect.
But don't you need
Yeah.
a little bit
I mean-
more than just the timing feels a little bit weird to make your case when you are making the exact opposite case for the intentionality behind the payoff? Like it just seems
I would not
very,
make my
very
yes. I would
inconsistent
not
in
make
like a really simplistic way.
I would
I
not
mean-
make my case in a court of law. What I would say is that there's enough suspect there that we should probably investigate, and that's what the House Republicans are doing, right?
Do you think that's a
I
okay?
mean,
I want
McCarthy's
to
doing
let
it.
fraud in. I want to let fraud in for a little bit. Go ahead,
I
fraud.
mean, do we not see the timeline? November, he said he was going to run for president. 3 months or 4 months later, this all unfolds.
This is not a
What-
case. This isn't an argument.
No, when the debates are going to happen very soon, do we not see
The primaries haven't.
the lines
I mean-
adding up? I mean,
This isn't how you make an argument. You don't just like pick the details that confirm the thing that you already would have that you already thought going in and then just ignore everything else. There's obviously Lactoid, you think there's perfectly good reasons why it would have taken 10 years for Stormy Daniels to sell her story. I think there's probably perfectly good reasons that the justice system would be bringing charges now instead of in November, in January, in July. So I don't think that there's any real reason to address one as if it's implausible and the other as
Okay,
if
I
it's
want to.
super-
I need to correct something because you keep
Go ahead.
misunderstanding me. I when you look at the timing of what Stormy Daniels is pursuing, I have no doubt in my mind. Okay, now could I prove it in a court of law? Probably not. But personally, I have no doubt in my mind that she waited until the most inopportune moment for Donald Trump to basically push this. I for campaign purposes, I have no doubt about that. But that
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily follow that the addressing of that is also a campaign purpose. Does that make sense?
I think given Michael Avenatti being involved with this, someone who I think any reasonable person can look at his actions and see he's a was very interested in having a maximum impact on the media and even speculated about running for president at one point. I think that's a very reasonable conclusion to draw. And I really mean this. I want to compliment you. I think the conclusions you're coming at make sense to me, and even though I don't agree with them. In Portland, I think if I could just share something to give him the most charitable view I could, I've worked with a lot of lawyers, and lawyers, generally speaking, you have to kind of separate between what they think may be true and the case they could professionally make in a court of law. Those are two different standards, and what I'm hearing from Lactoid is that that's what he's trying to communicate here.
I wanna kind of come at this from a maybe a different angle, and I'm still really mad at RJ right now. He was this is why I have 6 people and usually not 4 because I can't hang my hat on so few a number. I will say this. Is there any validity, right? Uh, to people who are worried that by arresting Donald Trump, you are going to create civil strife such that even if he is guilty of this, that it is not worth the risk to the country, that we are so divided right now, that we are so politically charged at this moment, that if we were to take that action, our institutions would simply break. Is there any validity to that argument? Why or why not? Go ahead.
I think that's probably the best argument, in all honesty, at least the best one that I've heard, is that indicting a former president, a presidential candidate, someone so important to half of the country over something that probably wouldn't be worth pursuing such aggressive criminal charges for if it were just like your average person is too damaging to the state of the country, to half of the country's perception of our political and legal institutions. I think there's a valid case to be made there, but I think that it's more valuable to project like a moral consistency to our populace and
Is
the
there a
world that
point where you would say it's too much? Like, is there a a place that the country could be at where you would say, no, I think the risk is too great?
no,
Okay, so
I think that the
even if you knew 100% that by doing this the nation would dissolve, you would still say yes. Go ahead.
a nation that can't prosecute its political leaders because the nation is too unstable is bound to fail for other
Fair enough.
reasons. I don't
Yeah,
think that there's any
yeah.
way you can avoid it.
Yeah, I entirely agree with that. America's not the first country to have to struggle with corrupt leaders. France ended up putting their own former president under house arrest, I believe, for a year for a somewhat similar charge, basically misappropriating campaign funds. I'm not a defund the police kind of progressive, right? I think that our police exist to enforce laws, enforce the rule of law, and make sure everybody has their day in court. And to me, I think the risk actually goes the opposite way. I really mean this. If you do not believe that America has a very serious problem with the powerful and the connected experiencing a different justice system than the rest of us, please raise your hand right now. I don't see anyone raising their hand. I think we all feel that the rich, the powerful, the corporations, the well-connected, they're experiencing a very different set of justice than we are. And I think if we believe in this country, we do need to take the rule of law very seriously. And I will say this on this panel to you, Lactoid, you want to start investigating some Democrats for corruption? I'll tell you right now, I don't believe the way they're doing the stock market stuff. It doesn't smell legit to me. I would love someone to investigate that and let the chips fall where they may. I think overwhelmingly in this country, we need more prosecution for corruption. I mean that for white collar crime. I certainly mean it for politicians. I think if you want to restore public trust in America, that is the most important thing we can do to get there. If we don't prosecute things like this, I think it just adds to this cynicism that all of us feel about our political system.
Is there not, though, to push back slightly on you,
Please.
Brianna, is there not a legitimate criticism that can be levied that this will lead to the weaponization of prosecution, like we saw with Hillary, the weaponization of investigations against her
Yeah.
over and over and over and over and over again, right? Causing her to sit through hours and hours of meetings and councils and all that things. Do
Yeah.
we not? Is there not a legitimate fear that this could become the new normal? That any politician that becomes prominent enough will simply be buried in these investigations, accusations, media reports, prosecutions, etc.?
Sure. If the justice system is done correctly, the Justice Department is shielded from the political process. I'm sure you remember there was an incident where Bill Clinton talked to his attorney general when he saw her on a plane when she was investigating that. Everyone universally condemned Bill Clinton, myself included, because it seemed like interference in the justice system. I would hope that my Republican friends would hold themselves to that same standard, with not putting their thumb on the scale with the Justice Department. If they do, I think it could cause more damage to our country and our Constitution, but it would be my hope that Republicans would believe in the rule of law just as much as I do.
I want
It's-
to.
Go ahead,
I'm going to burn a bridge potentially, and then I'm also going to build one. I agree. The rule of law is important. I swore to do that, right? To believe it's important is what I do. And it's important for everybody. My understanding is there's 4 major scandals that Trump is, people think that Trump might get indicted on. There's this one, the Georgia voting one, January 6th, and then the documents that are in Mar-a-Lago. I think the first 3 are complete bullshit. I don't think there's no chance January 6th. Any chance Georgia. I don't think any chance on this one. The Mar-a-Lago one's a little bit different. It's a little bit concerning. And this is also one that it turns out Biden was doing the same fucking thing. I don't think that going after Trump, I think, could potentially piss a lot of people off, and they're not right. I don't think it's right to get angry if there's a just indictment and there's a just prosecution. But I think what people are going to be more upset about is a perceived favoritism. And so I really like what you said, Brianna, when you said, hey, go after the Democrats too. I think if for the Mar-a-Lago stuff in those documents, if they went after Trump, but then, let's say Biden is done with office or whatever, and then they go after him too, I don't know how pissed people would be if they went after them both. If they showed, hey, like, doesn't matter who you are, it's not just going against Trump. If you fuck up with like putting confidential documents where they're not supposed to be, we go after you, right?
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, if Trump did it, then he should be indicted. If he did it, because just because
I gotta ask, do you think there are pretty significant differences so far in like the details that we've been given about those 2 documents cases, the response from the Biden legal team versus the response from the Trump legal team, the fact that they actually had to raid Mar-a-Lago to get those documents back versus the Biden administration willingly relinquishing them when asked? I mean, like, is there any reason to feel like we need to look beneath the surface before we just rush to the position that they need to treat these 2 things equivalently to make a point?
Well, the punishment can be proportional to what, how grievous the crime is. But I don't think that actually like the punishment should happen either if the crime was committed either way. So Biden might not get as much time.
Did the same fucking thing, quote unquote.
Yeah,
So
it's the same idea as like if I run to a store and I grab like a box worth $200 and I run out the door, compared to if I run in and grab $4,000. There's a difference, and there's going to be a difference in punishment. But if I say we should punish thieves,
more like,
well, yeah, they both committed theft. They should both be punished for theft.
Yes.
I think
And I think one of the facts that you're missing, Portland, is that with Trump, they had the ability to get all the documents the first time back in April when they were at his house or whatever month it was before it, and they decided not to take it.
Also, the FBI did raid Biden's house.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
They raided they raided one of the residencies recently, right? But that was like not because they had been refused access to anything there. It was because they were looking for stuff that they didn't know that they like whether or not they'd been given access to. As far as the stuff that was reported, the stuff like the classified documents that they were reported as having been found at the Biden house, those were, to my knowledge, reported, discovered, reported, and returned upon request. Those weren't the things that they were raiding the Biden residence for. I don't think that we ever got any information, or we haven't gotten any information yet, as to whether there was anything of a criminal nature found during the raid of the Biden residence in Delaware.
Sure.
Can I
It could
jump
be
in
less
here
grievous.
really quickly? Portland, I obviously share your assessment. I think there's a wide difference of intent here. That said, look, it is unquestionable that there is some extremely sloppy handling of classified documents in DC. If you read about the history of the structure, the bureaucratic structure in DC that exists to classify documents, you're going to read about a process that's completely broken and can't pick up with things. So that's aside. I think we both agree there's a wild difference in intent here. But we are talking on this call about public trust, about public faith in the justice system. And the way I feel is like if both of them broke the law here, let them both have their day in court.
Oh, I'm not
Prosecute both
disputing
of
that
them.
by any
Have a
means.
different
By the way, what's the
outcome here.
severity?
I think that would be fantastic for making
absolutely agree.
Americans.
You
I'm
got-
going
you
to
gotta let
finish
her
what I'm
finish.
saying. I'm going to finish what I'm saying. I think that's really, really important to let people see the Justice Department working. So, I also wanted to push back just a little bit, Portland, and say I don't share your assessment on the Georgia case. I actually think that's very smart. I think it's a very strong case. I think every American out there can hear that clip about Donald Trump and all the votes he's looking for, and trying to put
Yeah,
pressure Raffensperger. I feel like that is a very strong case in my view.
I think Lactoid made that point rather than Portland, but fair.
Sure.
Can I clarify?
Apologies,
Yeah,
yeah.
all Americans can listen to the clip. I would advise all Americans, though, to listen to the full audio if you want to hear the
Yes.
context.
I'd like
in
to
which that was said.
clarify real quick. I'd like to clarify my position re the Biden
Sure.
Trump comparison. If Biden is found to have committed any kind of crime and there is sufficient evidence to charge him for it, just like they should with the Trump administration and any people involved in crimes on their behalf, they should do so with the Biden administration and the Democratic institution. My objection to Lactoid was in referring to the situations as they're doing the same shit, which I think creates a sense of flat equivalency that aids kind of the muddying of the waters around what we're actually talking about and creates a kind of false equivalency that people who have a legal expertise maybe should, are the people that we look to be a little bit more detailed and a little bit more thoughtful with their phrasing.
Same principle, different scale. Is that better?
Yeah,
Portland?
but killing someone is like the same across all different, like there's justifiable manslaughter, there's murder, there's homicide, like there's all these different ways that you can kill someone and all these different like legal categories that it can fit into. They're all functionally the same thing. And I just find it a little bit sloppy to just give the surface level they're doing the same shit analysis with no sense of nuance if you want to portray it honestly.
If
Fair
Biden
enough.
if Biden was like was keeping confidential documents where he shouldn't have, would he be charged under the same statutes as Trump would?
I hope so.
Presumably, yeah.
So if it's under the
I
same
think that
statutes, that's what I
refusing to
meant.
relinquish those documents upon formal request would probably create a secondary like compounding factor worth consideration, right?
Yes.
Like if two people are asked, hey, we know you have these documents, you need to turn them over, even if you didn't intentionally take them, one person turns them over and the other person says, fuck you, get a warrant. Like, yeah, there's going to be a difference in the way that we consider those two parties, right? Like even in in the legal system, they're going to treat those two parties differently.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, like I've said multiple times now, there might be a difference in scale. Okay, I'm talking about the principle, right? The principle is they both did something that they weren't supposed to do. Potentially, if it comes to harboring confidential documentation. Okay, that's all
Yeah,
I'm saying.
and I'm saying that there
Yeah.
is a further wrongdoing in saying, "Oh,
Okay,
you found
we
we
got
have
it.
these documents.
Yeah,
Fuck you, you
right.
can't have them back."
Can I jump in here because I really love this bridge we just built. I feel like we're all in agreement here. Lactoid, I would like to try, and maybe I'm not going to be successful, but I would like to try to, as someone who works with raising money and spending money on political campaigns every day, I'd like to at least try to make the case that you should care about this as much as you care about classified documents. So, what we have in a post Citizens United world is a lot of dark money flowing into politics, right? I understand there's a discussion about Citizens United, but the overall thing you should know is that when it comes to campaigns being run freely and openly, where you can tell where the money is coming from, the brakes are off. Additionally, the FEC under Donald Trump for many of those years did not have enough of a quorum to meet and aggressively prosecute many of these campaign finance violations. So overall, I really want anyone out there listening to this to know that for me as a professional, I take my FEC reports extremely seriously. I comply with them as best as I can. I talk to my lawyer regularly. I try to go above board and then a little bit further. But I want people to know there's not the level of oversight you deserve in making sure your elections are run fairly and that the money is accounted for openly and honestly. I think in this case, overall, across the board, if we can agree that, like, if the Democrats are doing some things wrong with classified documents, I would like to encourage you to adopt a similar approach when it comes to FEC violations here. I would like to see the FEC be much more aggressive in how they prosecute these crimes across the board. Because I can promise you, with the lack of oversight, campaigns are going out there, they're spending money in ways that are borderline, probably illegal, and no one is out there checking it in the way the American people deserve.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
So
go on, please.
I mean, quickly, if the advocacy is, we need to have an FEC that more aggressively pursues people who commit these violations and issues them fines. My understanding is that basically every presidential campaign gets fines, right,
Sure.
for messing shit up.
Yeah.
That's
There's a different. Everyone gets fined.
Everyone
Like, there's
gets
a difference in malfeasance and a fine, right?
right. Everyone gets fines. I'm fine with the fines. With this case in particular, though, I don't see like a former lawyer who's before was saying, this was when he actually made the payment. This was due to like protecting my client's personal reputation. Um, Now is saying that it was because he was directed by people at the Trump campaign or worked with people at the Trump campaign, not Trump himself. That's important. Um, I just don't see that as a valid, like, I don't see that as a campaign expense, right?
Wow.
You're paying somebody off to not talk about the affair you had. That's what we're talking. Like, when I think about campaign expenses, I'm thinking about like commercials and flyers and hiring people to like run your campaign and driving around and like canvassing, that kind of shit. I'm not thinking of, oh shit, my wife might find out about the fact I fucked a porn star. You know,
Exactly. You're not thinking about the fact that your wife would find out about it. You're thinking about the fact that if it gets out and published, it could hurt your political
Right.
campaign. That is the point.
yeah,
He
yeah.
does.
So
You
all embarrassing
cannot sit
things are
here and tell
campaign
me
now.
that this
All
man who
embarrassing
has
things.
the grab him by the pussy tape didn't get him in enough trouble with his wife. Like, he had to bury this story to have a smooth ride at home. It wasn't like, this is just a silly level of like hiding behind the thinnest level of plausible deniability. The fact that like we can't put a text message that says this is the exact series of decisions that we're making on behalf of the campaign into the record because we don't physically have it, because nobody would have it in this case. Like, that we're going to go with the much sillier, much more like convenient excuse that he was like that the
Okay.
person who was obviously his lawyer at the time gave what I would call like the excuse that I would give if I was the guy's lawyer and I was trying to cover up my misdoings. Like, obviously, there's no reason to expect that his lawyer, like, while still being employed by him, would confess that, like, yes, this was misappropriation of campaign funds, or this
Yeah.
was done with the intent to influence the campaign. This person,
I just think that like the window of things that should be considered like campaign expenses should be like specified and narrow, and paying off like a hooker should not be within that. That's what I
I
say.
want to ask.
I think you
oh,
should expect more. I really do. I hoped I could convince you should expect more, but I see I have not. But I do think people should expect more honesty and transparency in election reports.
I want to be a little more direct with you, Lactoid, and
Please.
ask you just directly. Lactoid, do you think that this is a witch hunt against Donald J. Trump? That the Democrats and their allies are just looking for reasons and looking for things to pin on him and take him down? Do you think that is what this is?
I suspect that, and I think there is
You
enough. I think
suspect
there's
that.
enough suspicion there that I'm happy that it's being looked into. And if they look into it and they don't find anything that they can go off of, then fine. Okay, I'm not saying that there is enough to say that Bragg is being politically motivated. I'm not saying that right now. Based on the timing, based on the ridiculousness of the charges, it seems to me that they're just trying to get him on something. If only they could get him on something that they could say he's now under review on, something that they can say that he might be convicted on, right? It really feels like that
Did
because
you
they've been
feel-
constantly trying that since he got elected.
Sure. Do you feel that same way about the Clintons?
I honestly don't. I guess because Hillary didn't didn't win the election. I don't know if she had been like under the same kind of constant ire the whole time.
The Clintons
maybe.
since the 90s, dude. Like since the 90s, with all the different investigations into them, all the different people looking into their
Okay, wait.
affairs and things
So
like
there
that.
was Monica, and then there was the emails. What else was there?
Well, there was the realty scam. What was it? White. Gosh, I forget. There's also the accusations that they murdered someone to cover up their.
Okay,
their
they didn't like
you know,
investigate that though.
But this has been something that people have been going after them legally for a long time, right? Like these types of accusations, these types of things, Russiagate, Benghazi,
Well, Russiagate
all
was
these
against
different
Trump,
things, right?
Well, Russiagate was against Trump. There was the Benghazi thing, but
No, the
there was
Russiagate,
specifically something that should have been investigated, right?
Maybe I'm using the wrong word. I forget. There's so many, right? Yeah, that their foundation is a scam. I'm using chat here to help me out. There's a lot, and again, since the 90s, this is something that they have been going after Clinton. So I'm just curious if you think the Trump stuff's a witch hunt, why you don't apply that same lens to the Clintons.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't see. I guess I just don't see it as much as you're seeing it when it comes to the Clintons. I know of a couple instances, all of which have held water. Right? We know that Bill did mess around with Lewinsky, and we know that he did lie about it. We know that Hillary was keeping emails on a private server. Now, because there was an intent, by the way, keeping emails on a private server, keeping confidential documents in your house. I mean, that's also a little bit, I think, comparable, but I mean, not the same thing, obviously. But there was no like malicious intent there, so they didn't go after her about that, right? But she did it, right? Repeatedly, what they're finding is, yeah, they're like doing this shit, and we look into it, and there's like reasons why. Well, I guess we concluded our investigation. Either like with Bill's case, they impeached him, and or with Hillary, they decided to not go ahead with charges. But like, I'm just not seeing a bunch of like, God, if we could only get them on this, like, DAs, like, in fucking Montana, like, if only we could just fucking get them on this, and then like shooting for just ridiculous charges that have no merit. I'm not seeing that as often, so I'm just not as comfortable calling it a witch hunt.
Okay, fair enough.
I think your appraisal of Alan Bragg is unfair. When I found out he was going to be the person prosecuting this case, I looked into him. I mean, yeah, he's a Democrat, but if you look at the pattern of his career, he's gone after. First of all, he's been a state AG, right? He's prosecuted politicians for all kinds of corruption on the right and the left. He really strikes me like is this kind of career servant that you really, really, really want to support when they go into government, right? It's clear to me like he seems like he loves his country. He takes his job seriously. He's trying to like be a fair prosecutor. And it's just very easy for me to believe he looked at the facts here and thought there was something like worth going after. I think if you take a fair look at the man's like history, I would really hope an honest appraisal would lead you to that conclusion as well.
I think the big thing we're going to have to see, and he has until tomorrow at 10 a.m. to do so. I think we should just see what the results of the investigation here are when it comes
Fair.
when it comes to his character. Because if
Fair.
he because they've been resistant to providing what they have to Congress thus far. I mean, there could be reasons for that as well. But as this goes on, if we can, we keep getting kind of backpedaling, we keep getting sort of not presenting anything, then I don't know this man. I don't know his character very well. I'm just going off of what I'm seeing on the timeline and kind of what I'm perceiving about what a lot of people think about Trump generally, and the sort of we must destroy him kind of thing. But if it comes here, I will eat my words if this happens. If it comes out that Bragg had been given a tremendous amount of very good faith evidence that he committed the crime, and he was like, I'm just gonna do my job. I'm just gonna fucking do it. I will, I'll apologize to the man directly that I had those suspicions, but that's what I'm going to think.
And
until
if
that
that's not
happens.
true, I will apologize to you. How does that sound?
I will
Because
hold you
Fair.
both to
Yep,
that. I will
sounds
hold
good.
you both to that. I do want to ask. Again, this is kind of I'm having to adjust on the fly here, so apologies. But I have two people who want to come on. One that is very angry at you, Lactoid, and wants to hold you to task, and one
Okay.
that thinks that we shouldn't be prosecuting at all. Like this is too dangerous, and we shouldn't do it.
Okay.
Is that okay with everyone? I know this is
That's fine
again.
with me.
Let's do it.
Fine with
Yeah.
me.
Again, I'm just. If RJ was here, we would have a
I,
perfect
yes.
balance, but no
And I
one.
just want to say I apologize for not saying much. I know little about the topics. I'm going off of what I remember.
I understand. Well, like I said, you just jumped on
Yeah.
just to help.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
appreciate you trying. Let's
Yeah.
bring him on.
Thanks for keeping the balance.
You're welcome.
Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, if you have cameras, please turn them on.
Okay.
Okay. So I want to
Sock,
start.
turn your camera back off. Just kidding.
I want to start with Sock here. I want because Sock has been DMing me a little bit, and he has some issues with this case being a witch hunt and some fears about arresting uh Donald Trump. And I want to give him a chance to kind of lay those out to the panel and maybe have it discussed a bit. And we'll get to you, falsers. Don't worry. But yeah, Sock, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, so I guess let me qualify. I don't want him prosecuted for this case specifically. If the other cases are kind of brought to justice, like that's cool. But this one specifically does feel like a witch hunt because the feds had the opportunity to charge him in misappropriation of campaign funds, or as Lactoid corrected earlier, that it actually wasn't campaign funds. But the feds could have charged him, but now the feds decided not to. So now um a local DA is going to charge Trump, right, on charges that are obviously lesser than federal charges, but they're trying to morph them into making it so he is guilty, right?
Can you
And
elaborate on this? Can you be specific when you say they are trying to morph this to make it seem like he is guilty? Can you give us specific instances of them doing this?
um in this case specifically,
Yes, this
Yes.
case specifically.
so from my understanding, this is going to end up being like a novel interpretation of the law. I'm trying to remember the exact phrasing of it, but it's like this hasn't really been tried before in court. There's no like legal precedent for the charges that
Just went
there
to
are,
John
and
Edwards. John Edwards, they turned
no,
That was different.
it's a different charge though. And
Okay.
I believe Lactoid could probably elaborate better than I ever could. Along like how they're expanding the definitions of these charges and kind of muddying the waters a little bit and trying to get new precedent set, which I understand happens all the time in law. But it's it just feels like this case doesn't meet my personal burden for arresting a president or a former president. I think like there's
Why?
worse things.
Let me ask you this, Suck. Why is that important? If I did this, right, and they decided that I should be arrested, I'm not a sitting president. I'm not a former president. I'm not President Sunday. I'm not any kind of president, right? Fake or otherwise. They should probably arrest me, right? They should probably charge me if I broke the law. Why is it different because of Trump? What
Yeah,
is the
sure.
difference here?
Yeah, sure. So you're pointing out like the double standard, but I think the double standard has been there for a very, very long time, right?
Bad.
Well, yeah, it is bad, but we're not talking about investigating every single politician out there, right?
We
Which
put a lot of politicians in jail already, right? Like, just
Yeah,
for the record, we put senators and House representatives and mayors and
Yep.
local level politicians. Like, we put them in jail when they are found to have committed crimes. It happens pretty regularly.
yeah, but crimes of a greater scale, no?
I mean, I don't think that there's generally much in the way of like hubbub from the media when a low-level senator or like a low-level congressman is put in jail for some kind of campaign finance. Like there was a couple of them. I just read about a couple of them like 2 days ago. A couple of GOP like former senators and House representatives that were put in jail
Okay, but
for like for campaign finance charge, like some kind of fraud charge, basically. I can't remember the exact details, but it's not like it's unprecedented in American history to put politicians in jail, whether sitting or former. So like, why is the president uniquely like immune to certain levels of criminal justice?
I would say because he's still like massively popular, and like I acknowledge the double standard there. Okay, so before you jump down my throat, and you know that there is a double standard there, but it's more of like he's still insanely popular and is very likely to win the nomination in 2024, and we're talking about throwing him in jail, right? And it almost comes across like a little bit like Lactoid has said earlier, that it's kind of like a witch hunt where it's like, all right, well, and I believe Democrats have said they want to do anything they can to fucking make sure he is not elected, right? And if that means throwing him in jail, that means throwing him in jail.
Ugh.
Um, and I think there's
I'm not hearing a good argument for maintaining the double standard that you acknowledge exists just because this guy is sufficiently popular.
all right.
I think, if
Yeah.
anything, you're speaking to a problem that's long-standing in the criminal justice system to some degree, as you've already pointed out. And this is an opportunity to show the people of the United States and the people of the world that the president of the United States is not immune to criminal justice, nor is anyone else, because they are sufficiently popular or wealthy.
Sure, but like you can point at January 6th, right? For instance, right? And like January 6th was, you know, whether you agree with it or not, was partly caused by the rhetoric revolving around the election, right? And you know, you had a bunch of people in the country that think that the election was stolen from them, right?
What you
And
seem to be saying right now is that Trump can direct Republicans to bully the institutions of the United States to suit his whims because he's sufficiently popular, and if we stop him, he'll throw a tantrum unlike anything we've ever seen.
no,
Fuck that.
okay, I'm saying that not he can bully them. I'm saying that there needs to be a certain bar, right, before we just throw him in jail, right? Like I'm sure we.
Why is the bar not? Did he break the law? If he did, arrest.
All right, cool. So if he gets a DUI, should we throw him in jail? If he gets
We
his
Yeah.
just
or if he
arrested
gets
a,
his
Yeah.
third
we just
DUI,
arrested a
Yeah.
state senator for a
Yes.
DUI charge like last month.
yeah, state
There's
senator. Is that a president?
Yeah, exactly. So the president is not immune on levels that other government officials are not. Okay. This is something that is like the core of the question, and you're just begging the question instead of answering or addressing it.
Yeah, I have to agree. I don't know you. I don't mean to insult you, but you're really striking me as someone using emotional reasoning. I would really posit that when you're talking about criminal charges, that's when all of us as citizens really need to take a breath and really check our impulses, right? Like, are we acting because we want our side to win? Are we believing what we want to believe because we want our side to win? Or is there evidence to the contrary? Personally, I believe I've looked at the totality of how Trump has conducted himself over the many, many years of public life. You have come to the conclusion the guy's really not that honest, right? I can also tell you if you're saying, like, oh, Democrats want to do anything they can to put Trump in jail, I can tell you, like, if I were that kind of Democrat that were thinking like uber strategically, I'm a trillion times more afraid of Ron DeSantis than I am Donald Trump. I think if Donald Trump runs again, Biden is going to win. But that has nothing to do with my calculation in this scenario. It's is this like it really is about the rule of law and what's good for the country. And I want to be honest and say you're not striking me as someone that holds yourself to that same standard.
Okay, I'll let you respond briefly, but then I want to get Falsers in because Falsers had some issues with Lactoid, and I want to give him that space.
Yeah.
Any response, real quick?
Well, no, I mean, and Brianna, I think you are, right that this is like an emotional argument, right? It's not like necessarily like a logical argument, but I think like you can bring in emotion into these arguments
Yeah.
because, like, I don't, I think it is scary, right, to set a precedent that we are going to arrest former presidents. Like that's something that has happened in other countries that don't usually work out too well. And I really hope that like we can, kind of beat the
Wait, Sock.
Well,
The
let him finish.
principle that if you're
Let him
no,
finish, and then you can take him to
sorry,
chat.
sorry,
yeah, yeah, calm down, Portland. All right.
I I can't. You're saying a bad thing.
Yes, I know I'm saying a bad thing. Okay. All right. So, but it could come across as like, hey, and we kind of already have this a little bit where like both sides are like, oh, whenever one side gets power, we're going to investigate the other side. Whenever the other side gets power, we're going to investigate the other side, and it's causing a vicious loop. And now we're going to up the ante a little bit and be like, hey, well, now you're going to arrest the Republican president, right? So now, hey, guess what? If a Republican president gets elected, and you elect a like a bar, but except worse, right? And he, you know, wants to investigate, Biden and arrest Biden, and then we're gonna end up on this vicious loop where it's
Well,
like one
hold
side
on.
is trying to outdo the other. Go ahead, Portland.
Okay, there's two things. First of all, if you're looking for a party in like one of the two parties in the United States to outspokenly express that they intend to pursue any and every criminal charge humanly possible, everything under the sun that they can do to impeach and try to prosecute a sitting president, or the Republicans are the ones who have outspokenly stated that they intend to use the power of the House to pursue justice against Biden in any means possible. Like they want to pursue him to the ends of the earth to try to prosecute him for criminal acts. So the rabbit's already out of the hat. Like the train has left the station. To say that we're like cautioning against it as if the Republicans haven't already expressed a stated desire to do this is just like kind of backwards. And secondly, I think that the message that countries that you spoke about like countries that jail their former politicians, their former presidents, sending a bad like projecting a bad image to the world. I think that generally speaking, the countries that that allow their political leaders to exert such political power and influence that they are immune from criminal prosecution and immune from any like accountability for their wrongdoing, those are the countries that we typically frown upon a lot more on the international stage, and those are the countries that end up with lifelong like leaders and people who use those tools to consolidate their power and become like entrenched in the system.
Okay. I want to give Falser. Well, first of all, Lactoid, if you had something to say on that, go ahead. But then Falsers, I want to give Falsers the floor after this.
For sure. I want to like I guess partially agree with Sock, but also maybe there was some miscommunication. I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, so I don't think that you don't agree with the idea that if somebody commits a crime, that they should be, punished. I think the real point here and the reality is that because of Trump's position and because of Trump's personality and his history, that there is a sort of movement to try to get this guy. Like, we got to get him on something. And so there's a lot of bullshit investigations. There's a lot of bullshit claims. And there's a lot of bullshit being thrown at him, a lot of which isn't going to work, right? Because it's bullshit. So, an actual like prosecution for a crime, yes, right? But where the real sort of injustice is, the political motivation on just trying to throw shit at this guy to make it stick, when in reality, it's just a lot of it's complete bullshit.
Well, I guess this is a perfect time for Falsers to come in. This is some of the criticisms you had of you, Lactoid, in your framing. So go ahead,
Sure.
Falsers.
Sure.
Yeah, Lactoid, by the way, I don't hate you. I find you to be pretty pleasant on these panels. You're very civil. You're very reasonable. I appreciate that about you. Having
Thank
said
you,
that,
thank you,
I
sir.
think your positions on this issue are awful. So specifically, you stated that campaign funds can be used for anything that can help your campaign, including things like NDAs. And there's a
They
number of
should.
Okay, that's fine. There's a number of problems with that. The context in which you said that was in regards to the Stormy Daniels payment. And I think the principle that we should advocate to interpret our law in such a way where politicians can pay off mistresses with campaign funds is inherently absurd. I think
Wait, stop. You're saying it's inherently absurd. First of all, I don't even know if that's illegal. I don't think it is.
It is. It is. And I'll tell you
take-
that with my next point here real quick.
Okay.
Specifically, the House Committee of Ethics has noted numerous times in looking at campaign finance laws and how they should be interpreted with legal precedent. And this is a quote from them, that bona fide campaign purpose is not established merely because the use of campaign money might result in a campaign benefit as an incident to the benefits personally realized by the recipient of such funds. And they've gone as far as to reiterate that a number of times, as far back as documenting it in a 1989 report. And the other issue we run in, I'll let you squeeze in here.
Yeah, I want to squeeze in right there because
Oh,
if that's true, and I don't know if an ethics committee actually has, a House Ethics Committee has the ability to bind the FEC or any other kind of like prosecutorial body to actually be able to prosecute somebody and to charge somebody with something like that. With I don't even know what they would charge them with. It might be just an advisement. My understanding is, again, this is a lot grayer than you're saying. But the problem is, again, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If that's true, if it's not a campaign expense just because it incidentally helps your campaign, and in this case, it didn't come from election funds, it came from the Trump Organization, which is unrelated to the campaign, and it may have incidentally helped his campaign, well, according to the Ethics Committee, then it's not an election expense. And if it's not an election expense, then there is no felony.
Yeah, so there's an issue that a lot of people looking at legality run into, in that they say, well, this isn't explicitly stated in the law. But the reality is that our judicial system and the laws, they're not written in such a way where they're going to explicitly call out everything that could be criminal in every hypothetical, right? And that's why we have mechanisms like legal precedents, okay? And that's why attorneys and judges will look at prior cases and the rulings of those judges to interpret how they should interpret the law. And things like ethics committees at the House level and at the congressional level in general, Supreme Court rulings. Those are the mechanisms we use to get into what should be legal and what shouldn't. When things like, is it legal to pay a mistress off? That's probably not specifically in the law, right? So we need mechanisms like legal precedent.
No.
I would posit to you that there is
specifically
next to no legal precedent suggesting it could be legal, but plenty of legal precedent suggesting it would not be legal.
No. There is.
Lactoid, he's destroying you right
He's
now
just.
as lawyer.
What are you talking about? No, he's just factually wrong. There is no legal precedent that you yourself paying.
They're absolutely. I just read it to you.
Hold on. No. What you read to me confirms my point, right? You're saying that
Absolutely.
even if it incidentally helps your campaign, you're saying the ethics committee had this statement. Again, I don't know if it's advisory. I don't think that they have the ability to actually bind the FEC or to be able to bind any other
That's not how it
prosecutorial body.
works.
Okay,
That's
you're
not
saying
how it
okay. Again, you're arguing against yourself, because if you're right about this, what this means is that just because something helps your campaign does not make it a valid campaign expense. And if that's the case, then unless you can show me a specific law or a specific rule saying that using your own personal funds to pay off a mistress is all, like, for some reason an exception,
Absolutely.
and consider, okay, show me.
Absolutely.
Hold on, let me finish.
Yeah, go ahead.
Show me a rule or a law that indicates that somebody using personal money to pay off a mistress is considered a campaign financial decision, an
So
expense.
hold on, we just established there's not going to be any such law talking about mistresses, right? But
Right.
hold on. There is law in campaign finance talking about how you can use money for campaign purposes, but you can't use it for personal purposes, right? And then they go on to break out what those stipulations are and how they would qualify into one bucket or another.
Personal money
Now,
or
hold
campaign
on.
money?
Here's the bigger problem, though. Here's the bigger problem.
Wait,
that
can you specify
arguments.
personal money or campaign money? Are you talking about? That's the critical part.
You cannot use campaign finance money for personal use.
He never
It is
did that.
illegal. Absolutely. You don't think paying off a mistress to sign an NDA is personal use?
No,
Particularly
it
under
wasn't
this
paid. It wasn't
law?
paid with campaign funds. It was paid from the Trump organization, not the Trump
Can-
campaign.
Can I jump in here just
No,
super
hold on.
quickly?
This
Because
is critically important.
This is my expertise, but okay, please proceed.
I need him to answer this question. Did you
Sure.
know that the payments made to Cohen that allegedly was Stormy Daniels was paid out of, that had nothing to do with the Trump campaign? The money was from the Trump organization, which was not taking electoral contributions. Do you know
Okay.
that?
I'm going to zoom out on it here in a second. The campaign absolutely reimbursed him for that. Are you
No,
aware?
the Trump organization did, not the Trump campaign. Do you understand these are two separate organizations?
I do. Do you understand they reimbursed one another?
The Trump organization is alleged to have reimbursed Cohen, not the Trump campaign. The Trump organization did not
Okay.
take election
I'm going to
funds.
zoom out
Can
on here.
can
So
I can I
Yeah,
can I
stop.
jump
Here's
in
the
with
thing.
my?
I want to
Everyone
explain. I
stop.
need to
Everyone
explain this really quick.
stop. Woo, and then Portland. Go.
So this is again, this is what I do all day every day. So if I went to my lawyer and I said I want to get someone under an NDA, right? You would have to like justify it. If you were trying to find a way to like spend that money for the NDA in a way that doesn't show up in an FEC report, we actually do have extremely extensive laws about lending money to your own campaign. Because if we didn't, imagine how Howard Schultz would have run for president. He wouldn't have had to file anything. He could have gone out there, just built his own completely separate campaign apparatus, hired his own volunteers, had his own field staff there. He wouldn't have even had to raise money. Of course, we have extensive rules and guidelines about how you can spend money personally that benefits the campaign. It's just respectfully, it is laughably false. I've had so many meetings about this personally.
Okay,
This is
so just to
I don't
be-
need to say anything
I
else.
want to
yet.
finish my point though, because
Sure.
part of
you
my
haven't answered my question. You just like hand waved it and said, "I'm going to zoom
I
out."
think we did answer the question
No.
sufficiently.
No,
it's
I
it's-
reject that
it's-
you. I reject that you answered the question sufficiently.
That's okay. I'm
Let me
still gonna
let
move
me
on
let
to
me
the
ask you
next
the question again.
I'm
Did you
s-
know that the Trump campaign and the Trump organization are two separate organizations?
Hey, I've already answered that, and I'll answer it one more time for you, and then I'm
Thank
going to
you.
move on.
Thank you.
One reimburse the other. They're connected. They're connected.
No,
Wait,
they're
no, that's not what happened.
Brianna just went through it. Brianna just went through it.
Brianna, hold on. This is an inaccurate recounting of events. Cohen was reimbursed by the Trump
Right.
organization, and Cohen was Trump's personal attorney.
Lactoid. I'm going to
It
move
had
on
nothing
my
to do
bigger
with
point
the
here,
campaign.
because part of my bigger point is about getting in the weeds like this. My problem with Trump stands is they
The weeds
love
matter in a
to-
criminal
hold on,
prosecution.
Hold on. They love to get in the weeds on these little specific
Yes.
nitpicky issues. And the reason why is because when you zoom out, Trump has a pattern of illegality unlike any other prominent politician we've ever seen, particularly at the presidential level. So we can sit here and talk about the Stormy Daniels case and the fact that he made payment, and the fact that Trump opted not to testify. I wonder why. And he's flip-flopped on what his engagement was with Stormy Daniels a number of times, including recently when he admitted some things that were a little bit contrary to what he started with in that case. We could sit here and talk about the Georgia election law case, where there's a recording of him asking for a specific number of votes, where he has clearly perjured himself after the fact, where he considered sending a slate of fake electors, where he tried to remove, what was the FBI agent's name? BJ Pak, for not agreeing to go with the election fraud. We could talk about January 6th and all the things of that. We could talk about Mar-a-Lago. We could sit here and talk about the New York Attorney General civil filing against the Trump org for the property issues there. We can talk about the Trump org payroll case. We can talk about E. Jean Carroll. We can talk about the MLM Celebrity Apprentice thing. We can talk about Trump University fraud. The list just goes fucking on and on and on. And I don't know what it is about conservatives that you'll take one of those things and try to find a shred shred of something you disagree with in them and act like the other 9 don't exist when we talk about whether or not Trump should be looked at as a criminal and treated as one in the courts. But even if you could absolve him of any one of these things, you still have the other like 19 hanging over
Okay,
you.
falsers, I'm going to interrupt and
Yeah,
interject
yeah.
here. Do you feel the same way about the Clintons? We can look at Whitewater. We can look at
do.
so you think they also Clinton stands get into the weeds and the Clintons should be prosecuted?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Okay, fair enough.
I think when you look at any
enough.
given, particularly politicians, right, which I feel should be held to a higher bar, in fact, because of the power that they're given. When you look at someone and you start to establish a pattern of legal investigations and court cases and criminality, it tells a larger story. And so, like drilling it on one to try to absolve this person, it's a futile fight.
Okay, so
Kind
I'm
of a
gonna
dangerous precedent to set that if someone has been investigated sufficiently, then we should assume that there is wrongdoing behind it, even if they're found innocent in all of those investigations,
Yeah,
right?
Hey,
So
they're
I would
criminal,
say that
Portland. Look
I
at them.
think
They
there's
look
nothing
criminal.
wrong
They
with
probably did it, right? They probably did it. Just go ahead and prosecute them. No, I'm going to respond. This is just ridiculous. We came on here to talk about this indictment. Now, you can, again, rant for hours about the Trump derangement of, look at all these other times he was wrong too. But yeah, when we're talking about the indictment specifically that we're here to talk about, I am going to get in the weeds into it. And the weeds here are, you were so confident that I was misrepresenting things. And then you don't even know, at least you indicated that you didn't even know that the Trump organization is who paid Cohen. And you didn't know that the Trump organization and the Trump campaign are two different organizations.
Nope.
And you didn't know that that's how it happened.
None of that's accurate.
No, it is accurate because
clarify
I had to correct you multiple times. I had to explain it multiple
I
times.
answered your
And
question
then
multiple
and then
times,
when
and
I
you
go
didn't
into
seem to
explaining the details, the weeds, as you put it, as to this particular case that we're here to talk about, you have to spend 5 minutes talking about how, well, look at all these
hold
other
on.
things. Look how
Let me
gross he is.
ask you a
He
question.
once said to grab him by
Hold
the
on.
pussy. What a
Let
horrible
me ask you a
person.
question.
Hold
Such
on.
a
Hold on.
waste.
Let me ask you a question.
Such a
Do you
waste.
think-
It's not literally here what we're talking about.
Do you think the
Stop.
FEC would have been investigating the Stormy Daniels case if it wasn't relevant to campaign finance?
No, look, Trump is ugly. He probably did it, right? He's probably guilty.
No,
Look
that's
at
not
him.
what I asked you. Do you think the FEC would have been investigating the Stormy Daniels case if it wasn't relevant to campaign finance?
Potentially, maybe they were investigating to see if it was the
Do you
case,
think
and
would
then
still
they
be an
dropped it.
outstanding court case?
And then they dropped it.
Finance if
That's
it
the
wasn't-
important. What? Say, ask it one more time.
Do you think we would still have a court case pending with the Stormy Daniels thing if campaign finance and no issue of illegality was there to question in the first place? Do you think these things would all still have
No,
happened?
okay. You're just totally air. Okay, I'm getting a little bit heated. I apologize. Okay, so but you're saying that the arrogance of coming in and saying that I'm wrong is astounding when you're asking about a federal agency that is not pursuing Trump right now. It's not pursuing the Trump organization and not pursuing the Trump campaign about this. And then you're saying, well, would a New York DA be organizing a grand jury if he wasn't guilty? That's not how grand jury. That's not how.
That wasn't my question at all.
What? Okay, please ask
That
your
wasn't
question
my
one more
question.
time.
My original question was, do you think the FEC would have been investigating Trump at the first place if there
Sure.
weren't campaign finance concerns specific to the Stormy Daniels payment?
There may have been concerns, but then they looked into it and they're not investigating him anymore. That's indicative that he didn't do anything. And then
I don't agree with that.
okay,
That's not how that works.
Sure,
at all.
or okay, it's at least indicative
No,
that
I
they
wanna- I
it's at
just
least
stop,
indicative
stop,
that they
stop,
couldn't go
stop.
after him.
Okay, stop. I am curious, right? What Falsers thinks here, because I'm kind of on Lactoid's side with this, with the argumentation. Simply because you're investigated doesn't mean you're guilty. Do you understand that, correct?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, so what is the relevance, right? Especially since they did drop the investigation, as I understand it. What is the relevance to that? Like, how does that relate to this discussion of whether or not Donald J. Trump should be arrested or indicted in this particular instance?
I'm going to give you an analogy to kind of launch off this answer here.
Like, how long of an analogy?
A very short
A
one.
very long
please.
analogy.
Do you think OJ killed anybody?
O.J. Simpson?
Yeah.
Do
you
I
think O.J.
think
killed-
he did?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Okay.
should he be put
So-
in jail for it? No, because he went to trial
Okay,
and they
so
found him
here's-
not, and
here's
they
the
found
point
him
I'm gonna
not
make. Hold on.
guilty.
Hold on. So here's the point I'm going to make. The fact that we go and we do these long investigations is usually a pretty good indicator that there's something worth looking at in the first place, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to find an adequate bar to prosecute at, right? Those are two separate things, okay? They're not going to recommend an indictment or something like that unless they pass a certain threshold. There are lines that need to be met for these other things to happen you guys are talking about. So just
I
both
get
things are
that.
true.
No,
Hold on,
I
both
get
things are
that. No,
true.
no, 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 no. Stop, stop, stop. I get that, but we don't know, or at least I do not know, right? Whether they found a little bit, a lot, but not enough. I don't know how
I
close to
understand.
that bar
I
they got.
understand.
They could have found absolutely nothing for all I know.
Here's what I'm
right?
saying. I think you guys are kind of missing my point here. So it's both true that just because there's an investigation, it doesn't mean that there's a ton there, and it doesn't mean that there's nothing there, right? Both of those things are true. But a body that is responsible for investigating like campaign finance violations, they're not going to go in and launch a grand investigation at the federal level on a president unless there's something to look at in the first place. So to sit here and characterize the Stormy Daniels payment as irrelevant to campaign finance when there was a huge FEC investigation is inherently disingenuous.
Okay. This characterization of is essentially guilty until proven innocent. I 100% can sympathize with. Oh, that looks suspicious. Let's go take a look at it. I literally said that about Bragg, and I also said that if it turns out there's nothing there, well then fuck, I'm wrong. Okay. This is literally what happened here. All right. They took a look at it. Either they found nothing or they didn't find anything sufficient to go after him. Okay, now that's done. All right. Now you're saying, well, there must be something there. And there's also like, why would there be nothing there if a New York DA hold on. If a New York DA isn't organizing a grand jury. I mean, do you know how grand juries work? Do you know how often they decide to like recommend charges as opposed to not recommending charges? They're set up to recommend charges. This is how it works.
Let me clarify.
And they're not even doing that because they have nothing.
Yeah. I think we have a disconnect on what my point was, right? Because you're arguing something that I wasn't trying to illustrate. My point in that is that when you say that Trump's payment to Stormy Daniels was somehow disconnected from campaign finance law, is that the investigations inherently show how absurd that is.
Okay, you know nothing about investigations then.
Finance law.
You don't know how investigations work.
I'm comfortable with you believing that. That's fine.
So
Okay.
let's clarify.
I will believe it, and everyone else should too.
Let's clarify something here. The reason that it is being considered a campaign finance violation, even though the Trump campaign did not pay Stormy Daniels, is because it was perceived to be an act in effort to like influence the campaign.
Yes.
That is the reason that the payments are being associated with the campaign, but the campaign, like the payments themselves went from basically Michael Cohen got a personal line of credit, formed a shell agency, like a shell corporation, and paid her himself. And that is being interpreted as a donation to the campaign, like because that is being interpreted as an act done in service of the campaign. But the campaign itself is not actually.
That's the first accurate recollection of the allegations. That's yes.
But
what you just said is
qualifies it for campaign finance law.
It literally does not. By the ethics decision that you just read, it wouldn't. But then also, there's no precedent for it to be doing that. And then also, there's no evidence that Trump personally knew about it. It was the Trump organization paid Michael Cohen. That's what happened. It wasn't even the fucking campaign Trump.
He knew about it.
So
he's saying he didn't. He probably did. He's saying he didn't.
Everyone, please. I want to rewind a bit because Wu made a point earlier about this, and I think we are not really addressing it. So I want Wu to repeat her point that she made earlier, and then I want Lactoid specifically to respond to that point because I think we're missing it. So Wu, you remember what you said?
Are we talking about the rules about what constitutes like campaign finance?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Lactoid, this is really important. I understand that lawyers specialize in certain areas of law, but you're just plain wrong when you say there are no laws around the issue of the Trump organization funding what happened with Stormy Daniels. So if you're trying to put someone under NDA, the FEC does take the appearance of these things very seriously, right? They think about this. You've got to be able to make the case if you're spending all this personal money on something that could appear to be campaign related. And think about why that would be. Howard Schultz, for instance, thought about running as the Democratic presidential nominee, right? He's a multi-billionaire, right? He could go out there, he could build his own campaign infrastructure, he could have a chief of staff, he could have volunteers, he could have phone banking operations, all this dark money stuff that is not reported in any way whatsoever. Of course, there are very serious laws out there about spending your personal money in a way that could appear to benefit the campaign. The best course of action, if you did work in this field, in this area of law, I'm sure you, as someone representing your client, would encourage them to really, really be clear about these things and either make a loan to the campaign, to have the campaign make this payment, to there are strategies around this, but you're just not correct when you say this is just peachy keen. It's not.
Okay, so you said in you telling me that I'm wrong. You said that the FEC takes it very seriously.
Yes.
Is there any rule or any precedent whatsoever that a organization related to an individual cannot, using personal money, pay a legal bill, part of which is used to reimburse a mistress?
I think that's so granular, I would have to ask my lawyer, Dave Matrani. But I
Sure.
think you're fundamentally falling into what I would call a category error. And it's obvious, it's obviously false on its face, right?
No,
I have a
no, no, no.
question,
You
actually.
hold on.
I
You
mean,
you
like,
can't.
yeah.
Wait.
Hey, stop! Let her finish, and then you can
I thought she
respond,
was
my
finished. I'm
friend.
sorry. It's hard to
No,
time
it's
these.
fine. Go ahead. Go on in.
I heard him
Okay, I have a
talking, and I thought she
question
was finished
actually.
too.
Oh, fair enough.
Well, can I answer the question? Can I respond before I
Yeah,
get my new question?
respond before
Please.
Portland.
Oh,
asks
okay.
you.
Okay. So you can't say I'm wrong until you know that, right? You just said you're going to ask. That's fine. I agree.
You made the statement.
I made the statement because I've looked into it, and everybody's saying that there's no precedent for this, that there is no rule, and like article after article is saying, yeah, there's actually not a precedent for like this specific situation, and there isn't. There just isn't. So you cannot definitively say like this is illegal. And intuitively to me, it doesn't seem illegal, and it especially isn't illegal against Trump because there's no tie between Trump and that money to begin with.
Okay, so
In
that kind of
order
gets to the
you-
heart of
hold
the
on,
issue.
You mentioned me. I'm going to respond very quickly. I'm talking about category error. You're sitting here talking to us like, hey, stupid, don't you understand the Trump organization is different than the Trump campaign? And
He
what
didn't know
I'm
that.
telling you is the best practice is to make really, really, really sure anything the Trump campaign is doing does not appear to be benefiting the campaign. I cannot tell you how many times I had to go out of my way or give something up. Like you have women out there running for office before childcare was legal, a legal campaign expense. They're stressing that on their FEC reports because it's like I've got to pay a babysitter so I can go out to this meeting, but that certainly is to help the campaign. How the hell do I do this? Like, of course there are regulations around this.
I do
Yeah.
not disagree that it's best
Part of the
practice
issue,
to always be
Toy.
hyper careful, but just
It
because
kind of gets
something
to the heart of the issue, though,
just
Toy.
because something
Like
is
you're
best practice does not mean that you're actually like committing a crime if you don't follow best
Go ahead,
practice.
Portland. I want to hear
Yeah,
Portland.
you can make a felony doing like just completely trying to cheat the FEC. You absolutely can do
You
a felony,
can, it
and
doesn't
that's
mean you
why we
did.
have that's why we have lawyers, and that's why we have compliance people. When I file an FEC report, I have to have a specialized accountant go through that. If they have questions, I, as the executive director, have to be very able to answer those questions. Then you have to have a lawyer sign off on it as well. If you're a candidate, this is why you have a treasurer. The treasurer is a really big deal because you are putting your signature on there, and you can be charged with felonies.
Yeah, yes, this
if
is
you're
this is
not
yes.
doing it properly.
Yes, if you're not doing it properly, like you are actually the one making a category error here. You're saying that if it's not within best practice, then that's evidence that it is a felony. That's not actually true.
No, that's
Okay,
not what I
okay.
said.
Then
That
what?
is
Then
not
why
what I
is it?
said.
Then why is
he's
it relevant? Then
saying-
why is it relevant whatsoever to bring up
God
like
damn
the best practice on what you should do? Yeah, the best practice on what you should do in a self-defense situation is call the police after. That doesn't mean if you don't call the police, then that automatically makes it a bad situation, or that could even be used in a court of law to prove that it's a bad situation.
I think
I
what's
agree.
being misrepresented here by Ulactoid is the fact that like we can see a clear series of decisions made to like obfuscate that this was happening, that this money was being paid to Stormy Daniels by the Trump organization to buy the rights to this story. The reason that Michael Cohen got a personal line of credit, erected a shell company, and paid her himself is because it was very clear to anyone with even an ounce of skepticism or honesty that being so closely related to and like associated with the presidential candidate for the 2016 election, this act was undoubtedly going to have political consequences. And Brianna is pointing out that if you are the candidate for the president of the United States, you have a litany of resources at your disposal to become informed about the fact that this would create at
Yes.
the very least the worst impression of your practices possible and open the door to investigation for criminal conduct.
Yes.
And adhering to best practices was something that Trump himself was well within the capacity of doing. He is a billionaire with infinite legal counsel, but he chose to deliberately erect barriers of obfuscation to
Yep.
muddy the waters of what he was doing.
Trump didn't. Cohen did. Trump did not do that. What,
God,
that's
we
careful.
don't know that's true. We don't
If I
know.
could
We
just-
will
All,
know
all,
that
oh
in
yeah,
the
all we know,
investigation.
all
Yeah.
we know is first of all we know is that Cohen did it, right? A. B. No, just because he did it like in what you consider to be a shady manner, and I would consider it to be a little bit shady too. That doesn't necessarily mean that it was for political gain. It could be because hey, we don't want people finding out about this because that's the whole point of the NDA to begin with. So we're not going to make it obvious. Hey, we're transmitting $130,000 to Stormy Daniels. Why? For porn star? No, the point is to hide it. That's the point of doing this. That the whole point of the NDA is to hide it. That doesn't make it illegal, and that doesn't make it a political campaign expense, right?
It
The
invites
difference here between
scrutiny
this
of a
and the Edwards
political
case
lens.
is because Edwards was quite literally like making checks from
Okay.
campaign funds and mislabeling them, saying they
Okay.
were things that they were not, and that's against the rules.
So
I hear you. Hold on. I hear you genuinely, and I'm just gonna let the audience out there. We both made our case. You can choose who you think made a better case. I just want to say, I think that you've got to pick one, because on one hand you're saying, this is not best practice. There's nothing clear here. And I think on the other, you're saying, well, the Democrats are prosecuting this. You're arguing selective prosecution, right? You can't have it both ways. Like if you're saying, okay, I agree with you, this looks bad, it's not necessarily a crime, you can't simultaneously argue that like this is somehow motivated selective prosecution, because we both agree this looks extremely shady, and we both agree this probably runs afoul of those FEC regulations.
The first part is correct. The second part is not necessarily correct. This probably runs afoul of the regular. No, I can't say that. I can say it looks shady in the same way I think that like the reason I'm calling it like I'm hedging everything I'm saying. I'm saying it looks like a witch hunt. It looks like Bragg is being suspicious. And I thought we even clarified this. Like, yeah, if it turns out that I'm wrong, right? I even said I don't have enough to go off of to prosecute Bragg. This is different. People are saying they have enough to go off of to prosecute Trump. This is not the same thing. Do you have? If this was a panel where we all got together or you guys made the case, here's why I think it's a little bit suspicious, and then left it at that, I lose. I lose every fucking debate on this. Yes, of course it's a little bit suspicious. I'm not doubting that, but like there's a huge jump between it's suspicious and he's probably a criminal. He's probably breaking FEC regulations.
That's why we've got to wait for the charges to come forward. We're just speculating.
Exactly.
dude.
Right. But what I'm saying is, even like the
Exactly.
proposed charges, based on everything we know, this like looks ridiculous. You even agreed it was you not or like
No,
My
that's
statement
not
was
wait
it
wait
wasn't
wait wait
the
wait wait wait
Yeah,
strongest
yeah,
case.
yeah, like 20 of you are speaking,
Yeah,
and we can
let me
only hear
finish.
one of you.
I got one
Finish
sentence left.
Factoid, and then we can go.
Yeah,
from
not 30 minutes ago, you agreed with me that these charges are weak. You said they are really weak and they are not something that they should be going after. And that
I
is
say was not the strongest case of all of these, and I would agree with you that this is not the strongest charges that could be brought against Trump. I believe that's why I said. That's why I think.
Yes,
Right.
if my memory serves me correctly, you specifically called them weak because there's a moment of agreement. There was a moment of reasonability between us because these charges are ridiculous unless Bragg drops the documents. And hey, it turns out for somehow he found a certified letter from Donald Trump to Cohen saying, please, for the sake of my campaign, pay her $130,000. They find that, okay, now we have a whole different conversation. They don't have that, which because the grand jury is suspended, I highly doubt they do. You have nothing. You have nothing to go off of. This is just bullshit, and he's trying to fucking find something to stick to Trump because fuck, they hate him. They hate him so much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Look at this guy,
Two
Falsers.
points,
He
two
came
points,
in and
real
he's
quick.
ranted for 5 minutes about how much he hates Trump.
Points, real
That's all he
quick,
did.
2 points, real quick. I haven't said anything about my opinion on Trump, other than I think he's a criminal.
Also said he wanted to prosecute the Clintons too. Hold on, and
Yeah.
Only when
to-
Wick held his feet to the fire.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Here's 2
Well, I
points.
want to try to understand something about Lactoid's point
Oh,
here,
gosh.
real quick.
Oh, look, I
So-
want to look.
My
Okay,
patience.
I want finish your point real quick. I'm going to hold you to that, Portland, and then we'll go to Falsers.
Just move on. It's fine. I've
Are you
talked
sure?
too much.
Yeah. Don't do this. No. Okay. Falsers, go ahead.
To try to divorce what Trump did with Stormy Daniels from campaign finance law, thank God people don't take the word of people on panels and Twitch, because the reality is the New York Attorney General has spent quite a bit of time making a case that he did break campaign finance law, right? And he would not be doing so if these things were not directly connected. And the way, Lactoid, you characterized the Trump org being used and Cohen setting up a shell company as something he would do just as because he was like ashamed of it because it was like a mistress and everything. It runs completely contrary to Michael Cohen's testimony. Michael Cohen testified specifically that he was directed specifically to violate campaign finance law by an unnamed candidate, right?
Yep.
Specifically, he called out that exact thing. So not only do we have an exact reason that he made the shell company, we know why that reason was given in his testimony. And we can sit here and have a debate about whether or not we think Michael Cohen is a credible person to take a testimony from as a witness. That's a different discussion. But you trying to divorce these issues, it's crazy. It's maximum copium.
Yeah.
Okay, now you bring up a new point. I will address that. Prior to 2018, you're right. He did change his story. Right, prior to 2018,
He
he
did.
was saying what his ex-attorney said, that he was always maintaining from the beginning, which was this was in order to protect the reputation of Donald Trump personally. And then later on, when things were heating up and there was plea deals on the table, yeah, there was he did change his story, and he did say that he worked with an unnamed candidate's campaign. Okay, everything stopped short of Trump directly. He said he did say he was like negotiating with and working with and keeping in the loop. And he says unnamed candidates campaign. It was, we know who he's fucking talking about.
Sure,
He's saying
sure.
it was the Trump's campaign, right? Yeah, I mean, potentially, then, if he names those particular people, if you want to go after them, sure, I suppose. If you find him credible, if you find his story change to be a credible thing, you can do that. But that doesn't mean you can go out
Before we
go
go
after
further.
Trump for a Class E felony.
Before we go further, I want to respect everyone's time. We did schedule from 6 to 8. So if anyone needs to go or anything like that, I want to give closing statements. We have some. I want to open this up. I still want to talk about this. So if you can stay if you'd like. If you need to go, I understand. But we're just to respect my guest's time. I'm going to give everyone a closing statement here. The original guests, I should say. And sorry, newbies. But then we'll just stay in. I hope you all stay, but I understand if you have to go. Closing thoughts. We'll start with Brianna Wu. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, I am going to have to go.
I understand.
No, I feel like we're kind of circling on the logic here, and I think any viewer out there can listen to the arguments here. You can make your own appraisal about who in this conversation is talking about justice, rule of law, fair application of the law. You can see who is waiting to see what specific charges are brought by prosecutors here, and you can see who's trying to rearrange the furniture to come to the conclusion that they want. I urge you to make your own appraisal on that. On a bigger note here, we really cannot take our democracy for granted. There's been this real tendency over the last 20 years to just push things to the line, to ignore norms, to, conduct yourself in ways that just get worse and worse and worse every single year. And the statistics back this up. Americans overall are losing faith in our democracy. we're losing faith in our institutions like the Supreme Court and Congress and the presidency, and we are poorer for that. So no matter what you agree with today, no matter what side you're on, no matter who you vote for, I would really hope that you believe in the rule of law and you would want a fair and just application here. Wick, thank you for having me on.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you on. So we're still setting it up, but we are going to have some more stuff with Brianna Wu soon. More information as it comes out. But Wu, thank you for being here. Thanks for sounding off. And I'm sorry we couldn't get an RJ on. And I'm still kind of upset about that. I think there would have been a more robust conversation, but it is what it is. So thanks for being here. Portland, go ahead. What are your thoughts? Closing thoughts.
I am going to hang out for a little while. I appreciate you guys having me on. I appreciate the conversation. Biden's a fraud. Thanks for jumping in and providing a little bit of balance to the equation. And I think that we got a pretty good conversation out of it so far. Look forward to seeing where it goes.
Okay. Hopefully you can deal with the family issues. Appreciate you, Portland. Portland is great. Give him a follow at Portland is Burning. I'll shout him out in chat. Lactoid, closing thoughts, and I hope you'll stay. Lactoid kind of need you to stay. So
Yeah, I'll take a bio break, but then I'll
Yeah.
stick
Go
around
ahead.
for a little bit.
Last thoughts.
Yeah, really great conversation. You know, I think there's a impulse to you know, whenever we see one, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire, and while that can sometimes be true, that's not always true, and that's why I think it is important to get into the weeds of every specific case that we're looking at. We don't assume people are guilty, and you know, we take a look at this indictment, we take a look at the details, and I think it's clear. I think it's clear that unless something wild comes out, this is ridiculous. And hopefully you all remember this. And when nothing comes out, you'll all say, "Oh yeah, I guess Lactoid is right," as all of you always do. Every single time I come on this show, because you guys look it up. Oh wow, he's right. This is how Lactoid works. I understand.
Wow.
If
Is
you
that
like
what
what
happens?
that's what happens every time, Wick. Every single time. But no, it was great talking to all of you. Great panelists. I really appreciate all of you. And nothing personal if I offended any of you. I don't mean to do so. If you liked what I had to say, you can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for being here. Again, I guess we'll open it up now. So if you've been waiting and you've been like, "Wow, these people are really dumb," right? Yeah, get in that backstage and jump on in. We'll pull one in now, actually.
Wick, I'm going to jump. I've got to go grab some
Yeah,
dinner, but I
Pulsar's
appreciate the
always
discussion,
Go
everyone.
ahead, Joe.
Yeah. See you guys later.
Thanks for letting me join in the last minute.
Of course. Bye bye.
Peace.
Okay, Lactoid is on a small bio break, but we decided to open this up a little bit. We've had a few people that needed to go, and I understand that. But I know that a lot of you had opinions on this, on the arrest and indictment of Donald J. Trump, and I wanted to kind of give everyone here a chance to sound off on this. I'm not sure how much of the show you saw, Pondering.
I
But
saw, I was listening to it off and on. I heard some things that I wanted to address, but I don't know how they were addressed later on in the show. So it may
We
be
can
like, I
find
may be here
out.
for like 5 minutes, right?
Fair
This
enough,
may have
fair
already
enough.
been covered. Portland, man, it's Ruminate. How are you, buddy?
Sorry, I got a little baby here with me right now, so I'm just doing a little bit of dad duty while we panel it up and enjoying this convo. How are
Nice.
you, man?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Have you seen the greatest movie of all time lately, The Last Airbender? Did you and the wife take a moment to watch any of that?
My wife's already a diehard fan, don't worry. So
Gotcha.
it's one of those things that she's been waiting to get both of the kids seasoned on. So yeah,
Well,
doing a little
speaking
bit
of prosecuting people, right? Both of you need to be looked at and investigated by some committee, some institution. I'm sure we could find one, and we'll talk about this. But I guess we're all just waiting on Lactoid here, so I'll be Lactoid for a moment, right? Yeah, the case seems on its face, from Lactoid's perspective, to be fairly weak. How is this? I guess sell me on how this is not a witch hunt. If you think it's a witch, like, how is this not a witch hunt?
You said his name 3 times and he's here. He returned.
But go on.
Well, I guess first, if Lactoid wouldn't mind kind of recapping his like overall stance on, I know this because there are four potential, like there are four ongoing Trump cases. Obviously, I think this one's about the Alvin Bragg Manhattan District Attorney one, but um, I definitely caught the last hour, and Lactoid was making the case that this particular case is pretty weak, and there's of course the legal presumption of innocence, all these things, or the legal presumption of not guilty at the very least. If he wants to add anything more to that to kind of clarify, since I wasn't listening to the whole thing, but I'd also like to know his views because there was kind of a broader topic that was discussed at some point, and that was really what I was more interested in, which is the idea that, um, you know, simply put, whether or not Donald Trump is above the law. Because I know that there was somebody on the panel who was trying to make the case that it's really, really dangerous and we should avoid, you know, prosecuting a former president. I think that's ridiculous. But I don't know where Lactoid is on that position. So if he could clarify his stance, maybe we don't disagree all that much.
Okay, to answer the question directly, I have no problem with prosecuting members of the government or ex-members of the government if they commit the crime. Right now, I do just across the board. There's no reason why you should be unequal in the law just because you happen to be president. Flat out. That's with the caveat that I think, due for political purposes, political candidates are more vulnerable to bullshit claims, right? And people going after them for all sorts of dumb reasons. And so there is a healthy level of skepticism that should be applied when we're looking at claims and charges being made against, especially celebrities generally, but especially top government members, especially controversial ones. But on the principle of should somebody not be gone after if there's like sufficient real evidence against them just because they happen to be the president? Absolutely not, right? Or I don't know how to phrase that. They should be gone after if
Sure.
regardless. Okay. As to and kind of tying into that, on the empirical examples on the bullshit claims. I think I've gone into why I think this claim is bullshit. I think the Georgia claim is bullshit as well. Yes, when you look at that snippet, it looks bad. When you listen to the whole phone call, which it seems like nobody's done, it all of a sudden looks way fucking better. The January 6th, it looks
Less bad. Less bad.
not
Still very
no,
bad.
it looks way better than how it looks like when you literally take a fucking several second clip out and blast it on the news for sure.
Yes, it was clip chimped,
yes,
but
it
it
was
was
clip
not
chimped,
robbed of its
100%.
essential context.
No, it was absolutely robbed of essential context because he was talking specifically about votes that he thought were fraudulent to begin with. He
Yeah.
wasn't saying
There you go.
find me votes fraudulently. He was saying
Wait. So
he
he
was
slipped in. That part wasn't included when he said that he thought the election was a fraud. That part wasn't included. Oh,
no,
that's new context. That's
what he
crazy.
said, so I don't agree with him, but what he said is that he was very much under the belief that a significant amount
Yeah,
of
I
votes.
know what he said. I
Hold
listened to
on,
the whole call,
hold
buddy.
on. Okay, so you did, and the fact that you still hold this position blows me away because he said that he believes a large quantity of the votes were fraudulent, right? He believed they were fraudulent, and he's saying like all these fraudulent votes are flipping the election. You have to do your fucking job and find the fraudulent votes that are flipping the election and make sure they don't flip the
This
election.
is
Otherwise, I could
100%
lose.
Lactoid.
consistent
Hold on,
with
hold
the
on,
context.
hold on. Okay, that's the context that I think is critically important. The January 6th thing is complete bullshit. There's no legal basis that he incited anybody. And if you read the speech and you even look at the fucking January 6th commission, that's evident. The one that I think there is the best shot at him actually doing something fucked up was the fact that he was keeping confidential documents in Mar-a-Lago. That's a question.
Lactoid, are you an attorney?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That helps a couple of things. Okay. Because I was like, the benefit of the doubt that you're giving Donald Trump, I don't think is rational. But if you're an attorney, and by legal rigor, there again is the presumption of innocence, then that makes sense. Otherwise, I don't think. Well, let me ask you this: do you think Donald Trump is because I don't know where you stand. I know you're conservative. We've engaged once, I think, on Prime Kai's panel, but so just to get some background here. Do you think Donald Trump is corrupt?
Would I label him as a corrupt person? Probably
Yeah.
not. No, I unless you can point to me like specific corruption that he did, then maybe.
So okay.
And
Would
then
you-
does doing corruption always make you like a corrupt person? Does committing a crime make you a criminal? I don't know. That's an interesting question. That's like a really deep philosophical question.
It is. We're just we're cracking open the philosophy books here. It's Socrates and Aristotle all over again. So that particular adjective is not one that you would ascribe to Donald Trump. You don't think he's a corrupt man.
I would not. If I think about Donald Trump, I would think of him as slimy. I wouldn't think of him as corrupt.
Okay. Are there any other like major
So-
political figures in the United States that you would? I'm just trying to establish a baseline here of like how you view Donald Trump, just to see how I would go about having this conversation. Do you think Joe Biden's corrupt?
I don't think Joe Biden is corrupt.
Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton?
Definitely not Barack Obama. Probably not Hillary Clinton.
Okay. Sounds like that's a fairly
Nixon,
high bar then.
Nixon's corrupt, though. I'll say that.
Right. So is it,
for you say that Trump is slimy but not corrupt. What is the distinction for you between the two?
He strikes me a little bit like a used car salesman that's not necessarily scamming you, but like really upselling the shitty car.
isn't that a type of scam though?
Not necessarily. Not as long as you're not misrepresenting the terms of the car, right? If you're saying like, yeah, like 80.
If you're upselling, right? If you're upselling, doesn't that imply that you're attempting to get more money than what you believe the car is worth?
Well, sure. Yeah, you're obviously trying to put the best face forward. This is why you wear a suit in an interview. This is why you shower before a date, right? Are you definitely like not like emphasizing the bad parts? Absolutely, right? But like if you're a car salesman and you say, "Yeah, this has 500,000 miles
I have
on
a
it,"
question.
that's not that bad.
I have a
Well,
question.
it is
Do you
bad,
think,
but bad is subjective. So
And this is to you, Pondering. You go by Pondering now, right? It's not.
You can call me
Ruminate.
Josiah. It's my real name. It's my real name. Pondering Politics is my YouTube channel now because I
Gotcha.
rebranded from Ruminate. I still go by Ruminate on Twitter because it's what I'm most known for.
Fair
I'm
enough.
basically,
where I know you
I've got
from.
like 40 names. I'm
I'm
like
just-
Beelzebub.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how you like to be called. That's all.
It's Josiah. So like
Josiah,
Messiah, but
gotcha.
with a J.
Josiah.
What are you trying
Uh,
to hide from? What
I
is it
guess-
that you're trying to
Well,
obfuscate?
no, I know that.
We should
that's
investigate
a meme,
this.
That's a meme.
My
That's a meme. I
sordid
get it. Like,
history.
cut. I have another.
I slept
angle
with
to
Stormy
this.
Daniels. Go ahead.
Do you think that someone who wears makeup is being corrupt? They are misrepresenting themselves, right?
No, because I think that number one, it's such a minor alteration, relatively speaking. It doesn't
always.
reflect like
Have you seen some of these makeup? Like
well,
the
well,
makeup
for
they do
example, so
people?
I don't think that I don't think upselling a car is the same as putting on makeup. Presumably, you're not upselling the car because it's dirty, right? And it could just simply be, you could just wash off the dust. That's the equivalent to me of a shower and makeup. That was the analogy that Lactoid made here. He's a used car salesman who is upselling the car, but he's not doing so in terms of a scam. He's just trying to get more money than he believes that the car is worth. Presumably, it's not just because it needs a wash.
Can I hold on? If I'm running a pizza
Right,
business,
like, that was a
can I say
weird
the
analogy.
best pizza in town? Can I say that, or is that a scam?
I think it's just an opinion, right? Do you believe it?
Exactly. So opinions are not scams, right? So this is what I'm talking about. I'm saying like a used car salesman that's like not corrupt. They're not lying to you, but they're really emphasizing like, look at that fender, as opposed to like, wow, like 800,000 miles. Like, it's got 800,000 miles anyway. Look at the fender. Like, I don't give a fuck about the fender. I'm worried
Right,
about the
but if the
fucking
used
engine.
car salesman is trying to sell you on the shiny chrome fender and is shooing you away from like the rusty undercarriage, that's kind of a little bit more shisty than just your average car salesman.
That's every fucking salesman ever. And
Yeah,
this is people who wear
presidential
makeup,
candidate
and this
to
is people
hire
who shower and wear a suit before an interview.
Right? No. I'm sorry.
N-
I really need you to take showering out of that because we use that for basic hygiene. That's not to hide whether or not you're a dirty person. You
Humans
can be a
can
dirty person and
humans
still
can
shower.
not shower for a year and be fine. Okay?
Yeah, I
we used to
think
shower
I
once a
think
year.
like
we
disanalogous
still do it for
personally.
basic.
I
It's
think
still a weird analogy.
Yeah,
No,
that
you're
it-
just
that-
calling it hygiene.
Yeah.
You're calling it something
Okay,
else.
we're getting into. We're getting
Anyway.
lost
Yeah.
in the analogies. We're getting
Anyway.
lost in the analogies. I want to get back to the
So-
actual point. Go ahead.
Right. So
said
I was
philosophy.
asking Lactoid if he considers Trump corrupt. He said no, but then he also clarified he doesn't think a lot of other major political figures are corrupt. Sounds like it's a pretty high bar. He says the adjective he would use is slimy.
Right.
So I'll say on this particular case, I'm not particularly overwhelmed by the Alvin Bragg Manhattan case. I was kind of surprised that this was the first one that the the media seems to be gathered around in terms of this is the pending indictment. It seems like Jack Smith, the special prosecutor that Attorney General Garland has assigned for the classified documents for January 6th, that seems to have more teeth to it. I would agree. But I'm also not an attorney. I didn't go to law school. I have to imagine, especially since the charges have not been dropped, and they may very well not be, right? I mean, the Trump campaign has denied that Donald Trump has been notified that charges are pending. Of course, they're also adding barricades in Manhattan too, so who the hell knows? But I don't have any particular loyalty to this particular case. I will not dispute your characterization of it. I do think it's the weakest of the four by far. But I am also glad to hear you say that, on principle, you don't oppose the idea that a former president should be indicted if he commits a crime. I will say it's interesting because you take it's interesting to think that certain political figures, I mean, they are privileged, right? So like the idea that when Donald Trump was president, he benefited from the fact that you can't civilly sue the president of the United States, and the OLC, the Office of Legal Counsel, for the past 50 years, they've held the position that a president can't be indicted for a federal crime. So while he is the chief executive, I think in many ways he is above the law, and that goes for any president, right? When conservatives reacting to this seem to be skeptical of the idea that, hey, look, if you pursue a political leader, somebody who is running for president, that's banana republic shit. Do you agree with that characterization, Lactoid, that it's banana republic shit to pursue charges against not just a former political leader, but somebody who is the political opponent of the current president?
Not by virtue of the fact that charges are being pursued. I would base it more on just like the ridiculousness of the charges, and just like the levels of intentional obfuscation that I think occur. So, and you saw this especially with like the January 6th Commission, where if you read his speech, if you look at his actions, like there's no indication that he like legally incited the riot. There's nothing there. There just isn't. And yet, when you go and look at like the January 6th Commission, you hear from his political opponents talking about how, like, I think quite literally one tweet read, Donald Trump unleashed a horde of rioters or like insurrectionists upon the White House when his scheme didn't work, or something like the most charged fucking language possible.
Close enough.
Yeah,
Do you think that
essentially, right? But so you're saying close enough, right? I'm saying that like when shit like that happens, or like when they take a snippet from the fucking Georgia telephone conversation instead of like including the context, when they do shit like that, it makes me feel like a little bit like they want to be a banana republic.
Lactoid. None of these are being done in a legal manner. These are all on Twitter.
Well, that's what I was gonna.
I
Yeah,
understand.
that-
I understand.
that's what I was gonna
But
ask.
I
Like,
understand. Hold on. I understand it's not being done like a legal Well, this is being done in a legal process. And I guess January 6th was a whole commission. I guess it's not just on Twitter. And the commission itself was ridiculous as well. But these are Congress people, right? These are political opponents that I think referred charges against Trump at the end.
ethics charges, yeah.
Yeah, ethics charges, right? And this is
But that's political, isn't it? That's not legal per se.
Per se. And so I guess it depends on like the definition of banana republic. Do I think
That's
that
fair. Well,
politicians
can we
doing
break them
this-
down by the four? Can I get you to like this Alvin Bragg case? Does that feel banana republic to you? This Manhattan District Attorney case?
If it comes out that he has nothing, I will absolutely say that feels banana republic-y.
Well, hold on.
That's a fucking line.
It's not enough for him. No, hold on. Your burden isn't that he needs to, like, that he may have nothing, because you know that he has a shit ton of evidence, like circumstantial evidence and testimony from the people directly involved. You need for him to have produced a text message or a legal paper that says, I am Donald Trump. I am authorizing this payment of $135,000 to influence my political campaign.
Yes.
You have set a hilariously high and obviously impractical bar for what you would consider an acceptable amount of evidence. And to say that there's no basis for bringing even an indictment without that piece of evidence that completely solidifies the case and makes it beyond a shadow of a doubt, I think that that's not the way that we would typically want the legal system to operate.
Can I ask on what Portland's saying, Lactoid? Can you clarify? Because again, I'm not an attorney, so you'd have to clarify. Is your personal standard for the Trump situation just the blank generic legal standard, or are you imposing personally a higher burden on District Attorney Bragg because this is Donald Trump?
legal. This is I don't give a fuck that he's Donald Trump. What I'm saying is that
Okay.
they have to prove there's a direct tie between him and Cohen and directing Cohen to pay.
They have
Stormy
to do
Daniels.
that to convict
Hold on.
him, to not
Yes,
to
yes,
indict him.
yes. Oh, okay, to convict him, right? But also, it's against ethics to indict somebody if you don't think you can get a conviction. All right, that's also something that happens here. So there needs to be a good faith basis. He needs to have something from Donald.
does. We know he
If you
does.
hold
He
on,
has the
hold
testimony of
on,
the people
brother.
directly involved.
He needs to. I don't give a fuck about their testimony. I'm saying that he needs
Well,
to
can I
have.
ask? Wait,
He
can I
needs.
ask?
He needs
Can
to.
I
He
ask
needs.
a clarifying
You can
question?
ask a clarifying question in 1 second. He needs to. He needs to have some communication from Donald Trump, like personally, or like indicative that Donald Trump was like directing it to Cohen, directing the money to be spent for electoral purposes. If
In
he
Cohen's
has,
testimony, is not sufficient for that. Is that what you're? Okay.
I would not say Cohen's testimony is sufficient for that because Cohen didn't even testify that he got a direct order from Trump. He said he was working with various people on his campaign, right? That's what he was talking about. And if you want to go after them, if he can produce their names and you go after them and show the communications there, and then he could even testify. I'd be fine with him testifying, but that's not what he's saying. That's not what he testified to. That's not what he pled guilty to. And you have to show that connection to Trump. If you don't have that, then I will say this is Banana Republic.
I want to give Jenny a chance to ask her clarifying question. Go ahead.
Who are you pointing to, Wick? You were pointing.
Jenny, I'm
Okay.
making the general hand wave. Go ahead.
Oh,
Jenny.
okay.
Yeah. So, okay, for 2 hours, you guys focused on the Cohen Daniels payment, when literally in this case, it's a breadcrumb on the trail to the indictment in regards to tax fraud. That's what this case is about, is tax fraud. So
That's what Cohen's case
what?
is about.
That's what this is about. This
No.
is about Trump's tax.
No,
Yes, it is. Like,
Cohen's charged
have
with
you
tax
not?
fraud, and this is information he's
Yeah.
furnishing as part of his plea
Yes,
deal.
Cohen was charged with tax fraud. This case is also in regards to Trump's potential tax
You mean
fraud.
falsifying business? I'm sorry to interrupt. You mean falsifying
falsi-
business records, right? Okay.
As yes, which also constitutes a part of tax fraud in the state of New York. This is not about election campaign fraud. This is about taxes and taxes only in the state of New York.
And
Yeah, the
So, like,
articles
why
I
would,
read
like,
was that was like the most likely
yeah,
path for
Yeah.
an indictment.
Hey,
And-
they,
and, like,
they,
that's
they,
what
they
I
could
read.
all they could also
That's
get him
why
on
I-
prostitution, I
a
guess,
couple minutes
too.
ago that's factually lactoid. One thing you said a couple minutes ago is factually incorrect. You said that
Oh,
Michael
God.
Cohen said that he was directed by Trump organization officials. His testimony to the grand jury last week, like part of the testimony that he submitted and clarified by his lawyer, he was directed by Trump, cited as individual one in the records, like in the court
Oh, and
records,
he-
to
yes.
perform the act directly.
And he said, and for the record, individual number one is President Donald J. Trump. Yeah.
Okay, so when
I
he
forgot
was
about
when
that.
he pleaded when he was convicted, he was talking about the organization officials. If he just recently testified to the grand jury and he said that it was directly Trump, then this is yet again another change in the story. Maybe he
Or
said
maybe it's
that.
a clarification, right?
Maybe it could be
Because-
I guess it could be clarification as well. I
Yeah.
suppose. Now, I guess I haven't seen that particular statement. I know that his former attorney also has been in front of the grand jury, who basically said Cohen's full of shit. This is actually what he's been saying the whole time to me. I'm his former attorney. This is what we talked about. I mean, there's that as well. If Cohen actually is now saying, if he went in front of the grand jury and he's now actually testifying, I guess the third change in the story, if he's actually saying that, yes, Donald Trump directed me to spend this for campaign purposes, then I think that there probably is a basis to at least have a trial over it. But
Okay,
So-
so you agree with the indictment then, and you want to see it move forward. You just
Well-
don't think that there's sufficient evidence available to the public to convict. I win. I won the debate. All right.
congratulations.
Well, hang on.
I
Portland-
don't think Bragg. I would need to see something that Bragg thinks would, like, yeah, I can actually get a conviction. here. But-
So, well, actually, to clarify what the exchange we just had there, Lactoid. So, bringing an indictment is not an indicator that this is Banana Republic shit. Again, I'm just paraphrasing the common right wing talking point. What about a failure to convict? Like, if you could be sufficiently persuaded that District Attorney Bragg has a sufficient basis to begin an indictment, but let's say he fails to convict. Is that indicative of Banana Republic shit? Like, he takes a good faith shot at Trump, this case fails, you wouldn't say, okay, that's Banana Republic shit, right? That's just a district attorney doing his job in good faith,
The
right?
opposite,
yeah,
right?
as
If
long
he
as the evidence is
survives a
good
legal
faith.
challenge.
Yes, as long
No, I
as
know you agree, Portland, but Lactoid, I'm trying to gauge where Lactoid is with this. I'm sorry, Lactoid, could you repeat that?
Yeah, I mean, as long as the evidence that Bragg is going off of is in good faith, then and it's like sufficient evidence that he believes is sufficient to convict Donald Trump, then no, I don't think that's like Banana Republic necessarily.
That's fair.
But like if the evidence fucking sucks and he's like going after him, then it would be. So
Let me ask you this as an attorney too, because I'm just curious. So my personal skepticism, because I know initially, Alvin Bragg inherited this case. I think the original prosecutor was a guy named Vance, if I remember correctly. It's been so long since I've dug into this.
Letitia Vance, the Attorney General for the state of New York.
No, that's Letitia James. I thought that he inherited. I thought Bragg inherited this from this case. I'm pretty sure this investigation began under his predecessor, Bragg's predecessor, before he became the district attorney for Manhattan. But that aside, I know that for a while this was basically mothballed. So Lactoid, tell me this: given the high-profile stakes, it seems to me, again as a layman, that a district attorney, given the stakes, given the high-profile nature, given who the subject is it reasonable to conclude that he would not bring an indictment against Donald Trump unless he was fairly certain he at least had a decent chance of making a credible case? Or am I crazy for believing that?
Prosecutors bring bullshit cases. That happens.
I hear you, but I mean, but with the stakes like this, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure.
Yes, with this, I think the stakes like this make it more likely that it's bullshit. I think that there's a tremendous amount of like political benefit to have somebody under investigation during a campaign. We saw this with Hillary, right? There is reason to be suspect whenever like they time it for a fucking political campaign. There is more reason to be suspect than if it's some other fucking rando on the street.
Yes and no. I'm not. I mean, I hear you on paper, but I also think that you're talking about two different bases. But this is my personal skepticism here as a politics geek. I think the Republican Party, by and large, is a bit of a cult of personality. So I'm not entirely sure that Trump being under indictment would have a meaningful effect on swaying his base, right? He's fluctuated a bit in the polls with Republicans, but now he's still like after the special counsel regarding like the classified documents last year, Governor DeSantis was consistently polling in aggregate ahead of Trump, and now it's flipped again. Trump has regained the momentum. I'm not entirely sure, and I guess it doesn't disprove that that's a reasonable calculation. But if I were Alvin Bragg, I would not be entirely sure or confident that simply because Hillary Clinton being under indictment undermined her momentum, that would be the case for Donald Trump. I think it could very easily have the opposite effect.
I'm not saying that's like in the mind of Bragg. What I'm saying is that we know that indictments and we know that like investigations and charges and stuff like during a political campaign can absolutely have an impact. And this is a reason to be skeptical. This is a reason to view them in a skeptical
But
light.
if that's not in his mind, but if you're not saying
I can't prove one way or another whether like what's in his mind. What I'm saying is that like again, you guys see something suspicious, you want to like take a look at it. I'm saying there's something suspicious, and Congress, the House Republicans are taking a look into it. Right? I'm happy about that. They should look into it to see if there's any evidence of political meandering here. One quick clarification I wanted.
Right, but
Portland. I've been looking. You're saying like you have any evidence, like anything that I can take a look at that Michael Cohen indicated that Donald Trump like spoke to him about using this for like electoral purposes.
Yeah, just a second.
For electoral purposes.
Wait,
Right,
that
but
wasn't
it is
what I.
I'll link it to you.
Sure.
That was
Sure.
the direction of the payment being made to Stormy
I
Daniels.
wanna-
There, I didn't say anything about like, and he
Okay.
said in this
Right.
like that it was to influence the election. I don't know like the exact.
I sent it to your DMs, Lactoid.
Thanks.
You're
okay,
welcome.
but
Go
for
ahead,
this
Kenny.
purpose, for the purposes of the timing, it is a full year before primaries begin. Like it's not. I think like under our current system, it is ridiculous to call this during the middle of a campaign. This is like yes he has said he wants to run, but like this isn't a campaign season. This is not campaign season. This is prior to campaign. So saying that this is in order to like skew the campaign off the rails is it just feeds into this like campaign seasons lasting 4 goddamn years. which I think I hope we can all agree is very tiring. We need to knock this shit off.
So, Lactoid, out of curiosity, you said earlier that, we see something suspicious, so we support, it being investigated. You see something suspicious in the initial suspicion, and House Republicans are planning to probe. I don't know. Has it been established whether or not they have like a congressional basis by which to run an inquiry on District Attorney Bragg's case? I thought that was being disputed.
It's probably being disputed. They haven't sent anything like any kind of like official subpoena. They just basically gave him a deadline of tomorrow at 10 a.m. to provide the documents.
Let me ask you this.
Question about whether or not that's enforceable. It's probably
That's fair. Let me ask you this: do you, given, I think you would agree that whatever Alvin Bragg feels about Donald Trump, I'm sure at the very least you would agree that House Republicans are biased to look at this a particular way at least as much. Actually, let's cut the bullshit. We have much more to say that House Republicans have a vested interest in finding political bias in the case of Alvin Bragg. Like they have a political motivation to cover Donald Trump's ass. I'm sure you would agree with that. So would you trust their scrutiny into this? Like their scrutiny into Alvin Bragg's case, do you trust it given that, as far as we know, based on what we can evaluate now, their bias towards defending Trump is infinitely greater?
Right.
than-
I would not want just the House Republicans doing
Fair.
the investigation. It would have to be the whole House. Now, if the
Gotcha.
Republicans were like the ones calling for it, but if it's just the Republicans, then they're like hiding what they got, and they're saying, "Yeah, we think this happened," but they're not showing it. Yeah, that'd be fucked up. That would not be a
I
basis.
sent you the source on the information you asked for, Lactoid.
Yeah.
I also
Yes,
posted in the group.
Thanks,
I
Portland.
got it from Pondering.
Well, guys, that's really, I'm sorry, Wick. That's all. I thought there'd be more to fight with, but I've only engaged with Lactoid once, and he was pretty reasonable, and he's, I think, been relatively reasonable here, even though I'm obviously Team Portland. But Lactoid's also an attorney, so I guess just by definition, he's morally inferior to
Right.
the rest of us anyway.
True.
That's
What'd you say,
There is
Lactoid?
a question
By
on whether or
default.
not we can bully him ethically, and I think we can. Right? I think that is morally good, not just morally neutral.
Can we have
But
a panel about that?
we
sometime?
could have a panel about that.
About whether or
sometime.
not it's morally okay to morally acceptable to bully Lactoid, and
Bully
Lactoid has to be
lawyers.
here, but he can't defend himself. He has to outsource his
Sit through it
representation.
like a roast almost.
Yes,
That would be
yes.
interesting. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Well, gang, we have kind of circled the drain on this one. Thank you for being here. Sorry I was a little scuffed. We had a no-show, and that sucks.
Howard.
Uh,
Sorry.
I mean, maybe he's in the hospital somewhere. Maybe he has a good excuse, right? I don't know.
Listen, every hospital has internet connection. It's unacceptable, really. When a man makes, listen to me, those of you
Say
who
he's
are still
being
watching,
sarcastic.
when you make a commitment to John Wick, aka Wickles, aka Don Wickles down there, you honor your obligation, hospital or no hospital. Portland is literally holding a newborn, and he is still here. You see that? Like that is commitment.
If you can't, if you do agree to come on my show but then can't make it for any one reason, even if it's last minute and you're like, oh, something came up, tell me, right? Don't go radio silence, right? Don't go radio silence. Don't tell me. Don't just no show. Say,
Look,
hey,
if I were a Trumper on this topic, I'd throw up the walls and run as
sick.
far as
Hey,
I could. Too.
I overslept. Hey, something came up. I can't make it. Just etiquette. Okay. Well, let's rate out, gang. Well, what do we got coming up this week? Well, tomorrow, no show on my end, but at 8:00 we're gonna go on Madame Genevieve's panel, and we're gonna talk about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and that should be fun. So tune in 8:00 on Madame Genevieve show for that. Friday, I'm going to be speaking with Kidology and Prime Kai about woke and what that is, and that should be an interesting conversation. Yeah, that's what we got coming up, gang. If you like this content and you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out. Leave a comment if you so choose. If you're on Twitch, feel free to throw me bits. Feel free to throw me subs. All of that helps the channel out, helps me eat. Thank you, Def Meta, for the bits. Thank you, Feder, earlier for the bits. Thank you for those who have subbed today. Really appreciate you all. MSRP, thank you. This really helps me out. This really goes a long way. I can't do this for free, and yeah, I need money. So okay, who are we rating out to? That is the question.
I was gonna say too, one more thing. To get
Please.
Wick to 3,000 YouTube subs, Lactoid has made the solemn vow that if Wick gets to 3,000 subs, he will pledge to vote for the Democratic nominee
never said
in
that.
2024. Don't ignore him.
Canadian, Canadian,
I
Okay,
never
let's
dirty
said that.
go.
Canadian, can't even
We're
vote.
all holding into that.
Let's go to let's rate out into Nina. And say hi to her.
Nice hanging with you guys. I hope you all have a good night, and you guys feel
course.
free to follow me at Portland is Burning on Twitch and Twitter.
Do it,
Thank
gang.
you for having me.
Do it, gang. Okay. Yeah, make
Absolutely.
sure that you tell her that Wick sent you and spam those emotes if you got them. Thanks again for the subs. Thanks again for the talk. I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, little baby says bye.
Pondering, can I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely, sir.
Do you think that let's say all they have is Michael Cohen saying, Trump told me to do this in order to for election purposes. He has no evidence of it whatsoever, other than just him saying that's what I was told. And that's the only grounds that they have for the entire indictment. Do you think this is sufficient? Do you think this should be sufficient enough to levy a case against somebody? If I said today with no evidence that you paid me to give the money to a prostitute, should you then now have a trial?
If they know us, they would believe it. So here's where me not being an attorney becomes an issue. I will commit to this. I want the legal standard for Donald Trump to be exactly that of any other citizen. So my understanding is that eyewitness testimony or whatever. I don't even know the jargon for it. I assume that Michael Cohen would be witness testimony. My understanding is that that is admissible evidence, but I don't think it should be weighted any less because he's a former president or any more simply because I think he's a threat to the republic. I think that the legal threshold has to be uniform. So if that would be enough to be the centerpiece of an indictment against a non-Trump citizen, then it should be that here. If it would be
I'll see you guys later.
insufficient,
Bye.
Catch you later, Wick.
bye.
Bye, Wick.
If it's insufficient, then I don't think that it should be the centerpiece. But that's where my lack of legal knowledge is kind of a problem.
Lactoid, can I ask you a question real quick?
Well, first, are you satisfied with that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm satisfied with that answer. I'm trying to think about whether or not in I would feel like in another or any other comparable case, you would need something more, right? You would need something more because there are cases in which he said, she said can go to trial, and you can have testimony, but there usually needs to be something more, especially in cases like this, especially in financial cases. So I guess I don't know. The only issue is, no matter how uncredible this person is, if they're saying it, right, if they're coming out and saying it, could you, as from a stretch of the imagination, use that to okay, well, this is enough for an indictment?
Stretch?
It's a stretch.
It's a stretch.
It's a stretch, even when especially when his former attorney comes out and says he's fucking lying. He changed his story 3 times.
Cohen was his former attorney. So which one? I'm sorry.
No, the former attorney for Cohen.
Gotcha.
The former attorney for Cohen said yeah, I was his attorney. We talked all the time. Everything he's saying now is because it's not consistent with what he told me before. I have no reason to lie. He's just he's lying.
Okay, right? Toyd, real quick. So your position seems to be that it's unreasonable, or at the very least a big logical leap to assert that this money was paid, that this money would be viewed as a campaign contribution by an objective person.
Yes.
Now, my question is, if that were the case and that were the opinion of Trump and his legal team, that no reasonable person would assume that this has a political political purpose, that there's a political expedient or something about this that amounts to a campaign contribution, why would Trump and Cohen and everyone else involved go to
Go
such
through all of it.
like
Yeah.
lengths to obfuscate it? Why would
Right.
he start a shell corporation, pay her with his own money from a personal line of credit, and then get like shadow reimbursed via the guise of
It
legal
certainly wouldn't
expenses
be to
if he
protect
was
his
not
pristine
trying to
reputation.
obfuscate the purpose of the money?
Right.
It's
Like,
certainly
so,
not to protect his pristine reputation. That's for sure.
right,
so
right. The reputation was already torched.
no. So
Yeah, and
that's,
other
that's,
people.
that's a very like unnuanced way of viewing reputation, but especially not when you're a lawyer making decisions on this stuff. But I mean, there could be a number of explanations. A, maybe he was worried about unreasonable people taking a look at it, right? I don't think a reasonable person looks at that as a campaign finance expense. But there are people, obviously, in this panel who thought it was, right?
Well, and obviously there were
I
people
think
within the Trump team
even
that thought it would be, right? Because
well,
that's
no,
why
they may have been worried that unreasonable people would use this as like a political weapon, which they have, and of course you can use anything as a political weapon. I mean, I even brought up like a water bill if you took a shower before a fucking like campaign thing, and Brianna's saying, yeah, that potentially could be. It's like, well, fuck. Like, if this is the case, if I can't spend money personally, like when it comes to like personal NDAs, when it comes to I had slept with a hooker and I don't want like the world to find out, and I don't want my
Porn
wife to
star,
find out.
thank you, sir.
There's
A
no
porn
difference.
star.
There's no fucking difference. One's filmed, one's not. And
the
sometimes
camera is the difference.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I
one's
was about to
criminal
say,
and
yeah.
one's not because of the
ridiculous
camera
distinction.
wackoid.
That
Yeah.
single distinction proves the legal system is broken. But anyway, no, I think there's plenty of reasons, like political, kind of like sense of the unreasonable people might look at this. Now I'm not doing this for like political purposes, but the other people might try to. They might weaponize this.
So do you think I'm
Um,
unreasonable? Do you think I'm unreasonable? Because I would obviously, as I've stated several times on this panel, I think that it's a much more reasonable explanation that this was done for political reasons than for personal reasons, given the timing, given the nature of the allegations, and given the means that were taken to obfuscate the nature of the payment. I think that personally, it's a much more reasonable conclusion for an individual to draw that, yeah, this was done for political reasons rather than like to maintain Trump's home life and his personal reputation.
So, but again, like his personal reputation. Now, I understand there's like an implication between his personal reputation and like the political field, but no, I don't believe it's reasonable to think that paying a hooker is like a campaign finance expense. That this is like
No,
okay,
no, no. Hold on. You're kind of doing you're hiding behind the definition here. I'm asking you if you think it's reasonable to characterize it.
I don't.
No. Okay. So
No.
I am being unreasonable
Yes,
in.
yes,
Okay. Got it.
yes.
Okay.
I believe it. I believe
think
it
that
is I believe it is unreasonable to assert
Okay.
that like in the same way I think it's unreasonable like if you took a shower before a debate so you wouldn't look sweaty, all right, and you took the shower when you woke up in the morning. If they came after
I
you, if they came after you because you didn't report your water bill that you used to wash the sweat off your face, I would consider that to be unreasonable. Because again, like, could it potentially be like a political end? Yes. Ultimately, who you are is like somewhat related to politics if that's your job. But
Right.
I am of the opinion that when we're talking about like political expenses, campaign expenses, I think this is like should be viewed in a sort of narrow sense, and the reasonable view is like a narrow sense of like what political expenses are, right?
Ye-
So hiring
I
canvassers.
understand that, but
Yeah,
I just think you're being a
respectfully,
little
I
bit
don't
lawyer
think a
brain
shower is
when you say it
analogous
because it's
to. I
principle.
really don't think a shower is analogous to this.
It's
I mean,
not. It's not
showering is
unless the
morally
shower cost
neutral. You know,
$150,000 to install, and you
Why
fucking
does the
smuggled
amount
money.
matter? Why does the amount matter?
The amount matters because the amount is the reason that it's a campaign finance violation. You can't donate more than $2,700 to a campaign, and this was viewed as a campaign donation because it was done in service of the campaign. That is why the amount matters.
If the shower was sufficiently expensive enough, then
If the shower was sufficiently expensive for some reason that would almost certainly have to do with inherent corruption and like the means to enrich someone via your political office, then yeah, I would want that investigated.
What if the makeup? Like, let's say Hillary went to Sephora and dropped like $5,000.
If she's yeah,
I
if
still
she
don't
bought
think that makeup
100
or showering is analogous here because
Well,
again, there's a
makeup is
more-
directly analogous, right? You're
It's
making
re-
yourself look better for the crowd.
it is truly not an analogous to a married man cheating on his pregnant wife with
This is
a
lawyer
with a
brain
prostitute or a
talking.
hooker.
It's
No,
legal
during a political election.
not
this
morally
is
analogous
no,
in
no, no.
any
So
meaningful
this
way.
no, this is analogous on principle, right? Obviously, it's a comparison, so it's not going to be the exact same thing. But
I'm not saying it's the exact same
I know you're
thing.
not okay. But what you're saying is that for some reason is just analogous, and you're sort of appealing to incredulity of Of course, these things are different. Look at how ridiculously different they are. But look at where they're similar, right? Both of them are payments that you're making in order to hide a blemish for the crowd. You're trying to look good for the crowd. That's the idea. And so if you're trying to look good for the crowd, is that a campaign end? Arguably, if we want to do this fucking reach around shit, yeah, it could be. But under this definition, we drop to an absurdity. And the danger of this is why I'm saying we should narrowly tailor. A reasonable person would take a look at what is a campaign expense, not just what indirectly might help your campaign, which is what the ethics committee apparently also agreed with.
Again.
It's whatever is like in these categories. If you pay someone
You're
to
appealing
canvas,
to reasonability, and I think that I've already like I respectfully, because I like both of you, and I like you, Lactoid, and I don't want to like get into a big thing. We're both appealing to like non-falsifiable claims of what's reasonable, and I think that you're doing it a little bit more lawyer brainy than I am, because you have this like adherence to the need for granular pieces of evidence that draw a complete story to even seemingly like indict Trump rather than just like actually convict him of a crime. I think that it's fair to say that there's pretty good reason for a reasonable person to assert that this looks more like a political than a personal act, given the nature of it, the timing of it, and I think that it's weird of you to appeal to reason as like, oh no, only unreasonable people would think that. When you're talking to me and you're talking to ruminate, ponder, whatever you want to go by, Josiah.
Reasonable people can have unreasonable opinions. Like this.
Yeah,
this,
but you have to be able to
like
you have to be able to explain why
conservative
it's
lawyers
unreasonable.
right now.
So yeah, you obviously you guys have said multiple times that I'm reasonable, but clearly you think that my opinion.
I've never said those words.
Okay,
thank you.
so
So this is what I'm saying.
People have called me reasonable.
Counselor.
People have called me reasonable, but obviously the people who have called me reasonable on this panel probably don't think I'm being reasonable when I'm with my assessment of is paying a hooker a campaign expense.
A porn star, not a hooker.
I'm going to keep using hooker because that's what they are. They have to get over themselves.
Unbelievable.
Listen,
Oh my
as an
God,
attorney,
this is a Rob
you
North
should
thing.
adhere to the legal definition.
No.
This is what I'm saying, right? Oh my God, Portland, we've got him.
The legal definition here sucks. It's fucking stupid.
Nailed it.
It's fucking stupid.
You've been trapped.
It's completely inconsistent with reality.
All right, guys, I've got to go. It was
I do
fun.
too. I
Yeah.
appreciate both of you. It's nice talking to you. See you
Talking
both
to
soon.
you guys.
Good seeing you guys.
Yeah,
Talk to you
really appreciate
soon.
it. All right, guys. Porn stars and hookers are not different things. I know people believe it. There is no difference. The only difference is that one is recorded and one isn't. So I guess technically there's a difference, okay? But when we're looking about like, if I record a hooker, do they cease becoming a hooker and becoming a porn star? If I wear a camera on my head wherever I go, is it no longer like, does the recording of an incident change the nature of the incident itself? I know we do it in America. We categorize it that way in America because of political interest of different groups. But no, I think it's fucking stupid. I think any reasonable person would realize that if porn stars are legal, then you have to have. You're saying this is a prude side? That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying we should ban porn stars. I'm saying we need to legalize prostitution. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying just because you record it shouldn't change the legality. So there's one option of, well, make it everything illegal. No, I don't think we should be criminalizing, no matter how stupid and no matter how bad of a decision it is to hire or become a prostitute. We should never criminalize that because, again, that's your personal choice. If you want to trade your body for money, if you want to trade sex for money, you can go ahead and do that. That's up to you. I'm not going to dictate. I'm not going to control your free market interactions like that. So, no, it's like the opposite of a prudish kind of mentality here. What I'm talking about, but it is hookers. They are hookers. If you're a porn star, you're a hooker. That gets videotaped occasionally and put on the internet. Sometimes VHS, depending on how far back you want to go. The only good point, so that whole thing was like really interesting. It was a good discussion. The only good point made during the entire thing, in my opinion, against me, everything else was shit. The only good point made against me was the apparently Michael Cohen recently testified to the grand jury, and that's on me for not knowing that. I was like looking through AP. They didn't talk about it. I was looking through like CNN, New York Times, like all the places that would have reported this, none of them reported it. But I did get an article from I forget what he fucking named himself now, but Ruminate basically. He sent me an article that seemed to indicate that Cohen specifically was targeting. He's saying Trump directed me to do this. He didn't clarify it was like what it, whether it was for campaign purposes or whether or not it was for, yeah, he directed me to do this because he didn't want his wife finding out, or he didn't like the idea of his personal reputation being ruined. But there is that piece where he said that apparently Trump told him to do it. Does that make enough of a case for a grand jury to indict? Does that make? I mean, maybe. There's no fucking way that's enough to actually convict Trump. So we're gonna like if there is an indictment, we're gonna see a whole fucking circus. Cohen was convicted for multiple felonies, including tax evasion, but he was convicted because he said that he was working with the Trump campaign and that he was doing it to help Trump's electoral chances. So he had straight up admitted it, right? He said, "I was doing this to help Trump's win of the election. I was doing it to get around campaign finance laws." So yeah, when you say that, you're admitting to a felony, and that's why he was. That's why they convicted him on that. Why he was convicted on. Yeah. So again, falls short of convicting Trump, right? Trump hasn't said that. If he does, then that's a different story. But he hasn't. But I'll think of So I'll consider that one good point. I'm glad he made it. I mean, that's an interesting discussion. Does it look good whenever you're on a fucking raving lefty chat and your opponent makes actually a good point? No, it doesn't look good, but that's okay. Optics are a waste of time, right? I'm the guy that defended some horrific stuff. People think it's horrific, so I'm talking about. I think the truth matters. I think the truth matters more. The truth matters more, which is why I think it was a good point. I'm not convinced as I sit here today, but pretty sure Cohen did a plea deal, right? Yeah, he did a fucking plea deal. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to address a couple of things. Trump or Cohen did a plea deal, so that, I mean, shit. That make it even less. Yeah, that makes it even less credible, right? And I don't know if the testimony is credible enough, and especially, and the allegations need to be more specific as well. The allegations need to be more specific. Okay, but yeah, this is what makes sense. The allegations need to be more specific, and he's not credible. If tomorrow he comes out and he says Trump told me to violate campaign finance law, and here's why it's reasonable. Not that I did it. I mean, he obviously did it, but not necessarily that I did it, but that Trump was directly implicated in that. And he knew the ramifications, and he knew that that it was for campaign purposes and not for personal reputation purposes, all that. If they can get that out of him, then there's enough for a grand jury at the very least. Okay. If they can get that, there's enough for a grand jury. Not enough for a conviction, but there is enough for a grand jury if they get that, I would say. Because grand juries, they just bring them up out of fucking nowhere for any reason. And if Trump's going to be treated like everyone else, well, they do fucking grand juries on people on that too, I guess. Tegma, GG. I have no pictures of Trump in my house whatsoever. And this distinguishment of porn stars are paid to act in sexual scenes, hookers are paid to basically be sexual companions. There's no difference. There's no difference because, what if I go to a prostitute and I'm a very theatrical man, and I want to, I imagine this audience watching me, and I want to act out the scene of having sex with her. Well, now it's for a sexual scene. No, it's not for a sexual scene. You're having sex for money, right? That's what the porn stars do. They have sex for money, and that's what the street hookers do. They have sex for money. It's the same thing. One's recorded, one's not. There's the only fucking difference. And no, I don't think being recorded should substantially change whether or not it's legal or illegal. The fact that it's illegal to begin with, I think, is ridiculous. I would say, right with me, that there is 0% chance that Trump gets convicted. If Cohen comes out and like with the specificity that I talked about, and he makes allegations against Trump, then there could be an arrest, I guess, right? All you got to do is convince fucking 12 New Yorkers that Trump did something. I mean, that's not that hard. And then they say, okay, Trump, you should come get arrested. Yeah, I agree. Sex work should be illegal. Both partners having sex are paid. That's not necessarily true. And there are a lot of porn producers will not pay the man. And they are completely unpaid. And even in the cases where they are paid, they're paid significantly less. And so you can make the argument the difference in payment is prostitution. And also on top of that, if we want to, go ahead with this kind of insane line of logic, I could find a buddy of mine and say, hey, buddy, give me $1 and give this hooker $50 so she gives me a blowjob, please. And if he's a good enough friend, he will, but that's still prostitution. All the distinctions and all the differences are so clearly like motivated to just try to be like, well, I don't want hookers, but I really want porn. It is so transparent. So again, while legally I agree one's different than the other, if you look at like what the law should be, if you want to have that conversation, it's so clearly arbitrary. It's so clearly just stupid. Oh my God, you're so wrong. You're so wrong on this. Now, I don't like. I think prostitution's bad. In the same way, like gambling is bad, and drinking is bad, and smoking is bad, and anything less than a basically very regimented, like productive life is probably not good. But I'm not gonna fucking ban it. Well, hold on. Depends what you mean by sex positive. Because like I'm libertarian, so legalize it, but it's not good. I'm not happy about it. People shouldn't be happy buying sex work, and they're not statistically. People shouldn't be sex workers, right? I think that being a sex worker should carry stigma. I think it's fine to shame people, but no, I'm not going to criminalize it. That'd be ridiculous. I'm not going to criminalize sex work. Do we care that Trump got a prostitute, got a blowjob? No one really cares. Well, they did care. They impeached him over it. So they did care. I mean, yeah, he lied about it, but I mean, they cared enough to ask him under oath about it, and then he lied about it. So I think they cared. It is probably bad, but it is not the government's job to tell people what to do. 100%. That's my position. It is not the government's job to tell people what they can do with their own bodies. Now, if it implicates other bodies, it's different. But with their own bodies, the government has no role. The government is not your parent. They don't get to dictate to an adult if you want to exchange money for sexual intercourse. You can exchange money. You can exchange sex. It's completely arbitrary to make the combination of the two illegal. So, and if it's not videotaped, the combination of the two, as long as it's not videotaped, that specific thing is fucking illegal. Stupid. It's very stupid. Anyway, I mean, what do you guys think about the discussion? I mean, Brianna Wu is a relatively like she has a Wikipedia. She ran for Congress. I mean, she's a relatively larger figure. Um, I thought it was a great discussion. I thought there was like a lot of back and forth. I thought that I looked okay. This maybe I don't mean to sound fucking arrogant, but like especially because it was a one on what 4 or 1 on 3. Um, I think I made my points. I think I was able to make my points. I think they were good points. I think I was again like I think I basically won every point. Um, and the one point that like is I guess I'm struggling with now is just finding out that Michael Cohen is basically changing a story for the grand jury and going hard in on Trump. But I mean, other than that, it was pretty. It's pretty hard. It was pretty hardcore. Hardcore. It was pretty hardcore fun. It was pretty hardcore exciting. Um, and I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with the points I made. I, I think people are going to come out of that probably with no shifted opinion than when they came in. I think there's a lot of people who really hate Trump and they're just looking for any reason to fucking shit on him. And no matter what I said during the whole thing, they're just going to be fucking angry. Yeah, so you're saying she tried to change her image after Gamergate. I don't remember her from Gamergate. I remember that Sarkeesian woman. I know she was part of that. I guess maybe I didn't pay enough attention. I mean, that was what 2015, 2016. That was yeah. Before I got into like the online politics. I guess I don't really know. I didn't really know her role in that. I did like the sexism accusation at the very beginning. That was really funny. When I was saying like she was talking about like a malignant fever upon the country, and I said I called it like derangement syndrome, and then she said like don't call it emotional, don't call me like you're calling me emotional, don't call me emotional, and I said look you're calling it a derangement fever on the country. That's an emotional like you're obviously like being hyperbolic. That's an emotional phrase. You can be emotional. I'm not saying you can't. You can obviously be emotional on a panel, but I'm just saying that's what it is. And then she was like, that's sexist. I was like, oh boy. Okay. That was funny. The idea of a judge gets to tell people what is proper campaign donations and what is not seems like an abuse of law. Abuse of law? You can say it's a stupid law. I mean, or like an abuse of like the principle of law, maybe, sure. But I mean, the laws exist, and I mean, there's like a rational way to interpret them, but again, like I just don't see this as a fucking campaign expense. What? Like you use personal funds to pay off a hooker so you don't look bad. Well, this is actually a campaign expense now. Like in the same category of like fucking campaign commercials, yard signs, people going door to door, like pushing people to vote for you. Like your campaign, this is like a campaign expense in the same level as that. That just seems like such a stretch, such a fucking stretch. So I don't think he should get convicted on that basis to begin with. It's already kind of like a novel idea. But then, unless you have like Cohen who says Donald Trump specifically told me to do this in order to like affect the election. He wanted to fucking change the election, like it was electoral expense. I think that gives more credibility to the idea it was an electoral expense. But I also want to add on, it doesn't, even if that's the case, it doesn't necessarily make it an electoral expense because even if you think you're breaking the law, it doesn't mean you broke the law. So I don't think, so again, do I think it's reasonable that this is considered a campaign expense? No. So even if he said that, I still don't think he should be convicted. But there would be at least at that point enough evidence to like grand jury him. If he fucking said that, there would be enough evidence to grand jury him. Especially if they have like an email or a letter or some bullshit. Yeah, then you can grand jury him, I suppose, under those ridiculously weak standards. And I wouldn't necessarily call Bragg like a malicious kind of like banana Republican kind of guy. But I would still be like, guys, like this is obviously not in the spirit of the law. This is obviously fucking ridiculous. Like, you vote to acquit, but at that point, the trial is justified. And you know, yeah. You say she plays with like really nice with a lot of people on the left. I thought she played relatively nice with me. This discussion, like at the beginning, there was like kind of a little bit of fireworks, and she called me sexist. But following that, she was pretty like reasonable, and she wasn't like super aggro, and she walked back a few things, but it wasn't bad. I wouldn't call her like dishonest. I thought she was engaging. At least during this discussion, I thought she was engaging. It illustrates why it was so difficult to control campaign financing, dark money. Yeah. Yes, a ham sandwich does get convicted by a grand jury. True. 9 times out of 10. A grand jury is literally, they get 24 people. I think in this case, New York, 24 people, and then like 12 of them have to be like 12 of them, so half have to be like, I think there is enough evidence to maybe have a trial. I'm not saying he's guilty, but maybe we can have a trial. Getting 12 New Yorkers out of 24 to say that Trump should probably have a trial. You could say that he came down from Mars and was like vaporizing people with a space ray, and 12 New Yorkers would say there's enough to go off of, and they should have a trial about that. The Mind of Z. Hey, Lactoid, it was nice to debate you. Hey, what's up? Yeah, no, it was. Thanks for hopping in. Last moment. Yeah, I don't know if I've talked with RJ before. He seems like, well, hold on, I can't even say what he seems like because I never met him. I don't think, unless I was on a different panel with him. But yeah, Wick was a little bit miffed that he didn't show up. Understandably, I've put on panel debates, and it's very frustrating when somebody just doesn't show up. Right? That's fucked. Because you plan all around it, and you're like, oh, it's gonna be so great, and then it just doesn't happen. You're like, oh, god damn it. So I get his frustration. I feel bad for him, but I thought we improvised really well. I kind of took on the, at least I was there to take on, I always show up to everything that I say I'm going to. I took on their narratives and their opinions. And I think I educated them on a lot of things, and I think we got educated on a few things. One thing. Holy shit. Yeah. Cohen is a piece of work. That's for sure. Agree that Brianna is rarely aggressive. Rarely is aggressive. She does do that, but that could just be like, yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. There was a couple instances in which like she was trying to, the part that I remember most is she was saying like, here are the best practices, and if you don't do this, you could run afoul of the felony. That statement is true, but it has nothing to do with whether or not Trump committed a felony, right? It's got nothing at all. That is not evidence that Trump committed a felony. Is it true? Yes. But that's not an answer to what I was saying. So the fact that it was like being presented as an answer, I think, that could be like the only a little bit of like, well, that's kind of fucking weird. But I'm not going to hold that against somebody so much. In a debate, you're in there, you're trying to explain your point. It's you have to be quick. You have to respond. Sometimes things are said. I did not get the impression from her that she was an asshole. I got the impression from her that she was relatively kind, and way more than I expected from somebody from Gamergate. Let's just say that, right? Way more than I fucking expected, considering her incredibly left-wing politics, considering the fact that she was like a Gamergate fucking something, and how she had like a congressional run. I was expecting like something crazy, but I got a person, which was kind of nice, actually. The fireworks really came off when that one guy joined. Farsis, I think his name was, and he was just saying shit, because he was in the chat like, Lactoid's so fucking wrong, Lactoid's so stupid. I don't know if he said stupid. Apparently he's I don't know if he was doing ad homs, but he was definitely saying that I'm wrong on this. He was saying I'm lying. I was misrepresenting, and then he comes on and just fucking just got blown up. She also uses her credentials successfully. Yeah, I try my best to avoid that. And Tainted, you know this because I've seen you around a lot, especially a lot of my panels. I almost never bring up the fact that I'm a lawyer. Sometimes I'll say like, "Hey, I'm a lawyer and I do political streaming and blah 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 blah." I never be like, "I'm a lawyer and I know this," right? I try my best not to do that. At the beginning of this debate, I did bring up that I was a lawyer, and other people referenced it a lot. They referenced the fact that I'm a lawyer a lot, which was, I don't think I brought it up. I don't think I brought it up once following that, but everyone else was bringing up that I was a lawyer. Yeah, exactly. Everyone else was bringing that up. But at the beginning, I mentioned it. I did. I'll own that. And I think there was like one debate I had on Prime Kais where I was having a debate with Spartacus, who's a cool guy, great guy. But I was having a debate with him, and he was saying something very stupid, and like something that I know is just blatantly not true, like legally. And I think I pulled that card there. I'll be like, I think that's the one other time I can remember. That was almost a few months ago. But I try my best not to pull that up because credentials really shouldn't matter as to the relevance of an argument. They should own like, if your argument ever rests on your credentials, it's a fucking like it's a shit argument, right? Like what a shit argument. Like, oh, I'm right because I went to college, or oh yeah, I have a master's in this. Actually, you fucking arrogant. It's like, oh, I don't care what you have. Like, if you are qualified to speak on this, then explain it correctly, and let the credentials speak for themselves, right? I think that's like really important because otherwise it just comes across like haha, I got this, I'm better than you, you fucking blue collar fucking coal miner, you don't know shit, huh? When in reality, like that's not like there's PhDs on like neurophysics that say dumb shit, right? Oh, what is it? Neil deGrasse Tyson, very smart guy. He fucking says dumb shit every other month, and a lot of people have called him out on it, right? Like, yeah, you're smart, but like you can't just be like, I'm an astrophysicist. Therefore, nuclear fission or nuclear fusion isn't like like radiation from nuclear fusion is not a problem. That's just not true. Like you're just like any cursory Google search will like show that's not true. I don't know why you're saying that. It's just not true. Fauci, yeah, another good example. But we got to be careful about that one in Twitch. I did campaign finance. You would get in so much trouble from yeah. She did do that a lot, but then she also said like when you corner her and you're like, what, like you cannot definitively say this. She did say, "You're right. I'll have to talk to my lawyer about that," which at the very least she didn't like just totally bullshit and be like, "No, actually, I was in campaign finance and I know exactly that is absolutely against the rules." It's like, okay, well, right. It's one of those things where I wouldn't say that she's like, again, she's not lying. She's not being like a. Is there some debate tactics happening? Yes, but I wouldn't call her a liar. I'm not trying to like suck her off here. I don't care about what she thinks of me. I mean, obviously we disagree strongly, and it was getting heated at points. And apparently she thinks I'm a sexist. But like, I'm just trying to avoid like the trope of like, oh, you finish a debate with somebody and you're just gonna talk shit about them just because they disagreed with you. I'll talk shit about where the shit needs to be talked, but I'm not gonna just because she was on the opposing side of me, I'm not gonna like shit on her. So I will talk like, so the other person that was on the opposing side, like the pharmacist guy. I thought, I've talked to him before. He's not a terrible person. I don't think he's not like mean. I thought that his level of confidence in Wix chat did not match what he brought at all. And I thought that and I think he started to realize that, and that's why he was like, kind of, let's take a step back and look. Let's go through this diatribe of like every single thing that Trump has done and why you should never trust him. That part was hilarious. So, and he should think so too. I'll tell that to his face. This is for public. This is for the public to hear. I will defend everything I say. Unless you have evidence that I'm objectively wrong, then I will clarify or retract, because that's what honest people do. Anyway, this was a great experience. I want to thank Wick for having me on. He's not here right now, but yeah, I really appreciate Wick giving me that opportunity. I do agree. I think Brianna was the only person who kind of even seemed to know like what the allegations were. Even I think other people kind of dawned on them later as they were like digging through sources, panically as the debate was like in its 30th minute. But it was still a complete blast. I think it was great. I think for 99% of it, I think it looked really good for us, and I think a lot of truth was brought to light today, which is always the goal. What we are going to do now is first say, if you enjoy the content, please follow. I always appreciate people who give me bits and subs, and you guys are great. I'm never going to, I'm not never demand that. I'm not going to like ask it for it. I'm not going to change it. I appreciate it, but I'm not going to ask for it. The one thing I will ask is for you to give me a follow, just because this is about. I think this is about a message. This is about bringing integrity to politics and also doing fun debates at the same time. I do this because I love it, right? I have a full-time job, and I appreciate all of your patience too with my schedule, right? The full-time job, it is a lot, but I have to make time for this because it's what I love to do, and I appreciate all of you for letting me do what I love to do, and that's really cool. So, and I will not take it for granted. Thank you, MSRP. I appreciate it. So, yeah, if you haven't given me a follow, consider giving me a follow. What we're going to do now is we're going to raid into our friend Fabian Liberty Scott. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know if today is serial killer night or not, but normally he's got some pretty good stuff. So, yeah, thanks again. All right, ciao.